Um, good morning, colleagues and members of the public, and also people more widely working within CCAM. This is a formal meeting of the CCAM board. It is a meeting held in public. It's not a public meeting, but we are always receptive to questions from members of the public. And just to say, for this particular meeting, we have received no formal questions in advance. Just to say a few housekeeping apologies. Karen Norman, our Senior Independent Director, is on holiday. She's in Australia at the moment. She gave me notice of that holiday when she first joined the board, so that is fully understood and acceptable. And I know that Karen is having a wonderful time, so that's good to know. And she sent some photographs, so that's really encouraging to to add that in. I see sitting at the back of the room members of the Shadow Board. It's a real great pleasure that you are here today. You are part of CCAM. Your views are important, and I'm really pleased at the way in which this initiative is taking flight, and your views are particularly important to us. Normally we would have a traditional, the tradition is that we have a board story, and that board story is a way in which the board continues to connect and keep us true to the fact that we are here to serve patients and to serve our people. Today we're not having a board story, but later as part of the agenda we will hear about 3 new models of clinical care that have been developed within CCAM and are particularly relevant as we go forward and face the challenges of winter, and that will come shortly. Could I ask firstly, are there any declarations of interest? Very quickly around the room. I'm not seeing anybody, so that is confirmed. Can I ask for approval of the minutes of the last meeting from August? Are they a true and fair record?
Chair, just to say that I received recently just one minor amendment in relation to Nick's attendance at the last Finance Committee, which I'll make, but other than that I've had no other comments.
Okay, that's good. So unless I hear to the contrary, they are approved. Thank you very much. And the action log, would you like to give us an update?
Chair, quite straightforward. There are 3 open actions from recent meetings. Each of them will be due to be covered in the next board cycle between now and December.
Okay, unless I hear anybody's got any challenge to that. No. Okay. So we go on to the next item, which is my report. Just a few observations from me. For those members of the public and more widely within CCAM, we have over the last 6 months been adopting a slightly different approach at the board. We cover all our key responsibilities, our focus on people, patient care, making sure that we use our money effectively and that we are a good system partner. What we have tried to do at each board meeting, though, is give a particular focus to one aspect of those things that I've just mentioned so that we can delve into a little bit more detail. We looked at quality of care earlier in the year, and we're returning to that today. So while we will still focus on the broad areas of assurance around money, people, we are giving particular attention to patient care, and we will be looking at 3 models of care. And this is particularly important because members of the public and our partners, it is important that you have confidence and assurance that as we get closer and closer to winter, we are prepared to do the maximum we can to support those whom we serve. So that will be a particular focus of this meeting. And I think at the end, the question is, we need to ask ourselves is, are we confident that we are doing our maximum to respond to winter pressures? I would also like to draw attention to the recent Council of Governors meeting. Governors are important to our constitution and our overall governance. We had a very good meeting. Governors hold NEDs to account for the way in which we support our executives and in turn hold them to account, and it was a particularly good meeting. We also had the annual general meeting of CCAM. Again, I was incredibly impressed by the multiple contributions that we had from CCAM people, demonstrating the wide breadth of skills that we have within the organisation and the wide breadth of clinical care which we provide. Not just about clinical care, it's also about how we support our people. And what I was particularly pleased to see was the many networks that were there on the day, explaining how they were engaging with our both internally and externally. That's broadly all. No, there were two other things I should say actually, while I remember. In terms of my engagements, I don't really go into too much detail there. They're there for you to read. But I would like to pay particular tribute to our military network within CCAM. I probably got the name wrong there, but the purpose of this is to demonstrate that those who have given service to their country in the military, when they leave, that CCAM is one of those organisations they feel would be particularly welcome to them and would make their experience particularly exceptional in terms of enabling them to continue to contribute to public life. I was really pleased to see that we won the Gold Medal Award for the way in which we support our former veterans. I feel particularly embarrassed when I go because I, as chair, go up, receive the award, but I didn't do any of the work. But it was really, really impressive to see, what our people are doing within the organisation, and it is a real tribute to CCAM as an excellent place to work. Final thing that I would say is sitting at the back of the room is Steve Lennox, and I'd like to say particular thanks to Steve. I know Simon will do so shortly as well. So those of you who've been around for a while, that CCAM has been on a considerable journey. 3 to 4 years ago, we were not necessarily in the best of places, and we were very fortunate to be allocated, that's the right word, Steve, to be our improvement partner. Coming from NHS England, he's worked very extensively with many of us in this room to help CCAM continue to improve, and I have been particularly grateful for the support that he's given me, and I know my predecessors, Usman and David Astley, were of very much the same view. So, Steve, not to embarrass you anymore, tremendous thanks. You've had a real impact here, and I don't know what you're going to continue to do across the NHS, but we wish you the very best going forward. Thank you. So that concludes my update, unless anybody's got particular questions. And I think at that point, I hand over to Howard as chair of the audit committee.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, so by way of update for the board, in the alert section of the paper, you may recall the board had an annual effectiveness review, and we came up with some we will statements. And I think this was one of Steve's ideas in terms of improvements. So I've just commented here in terms of updating ourselves on where we are with those we will statements. They were all reported green, apart from the 3 set out here, which were rated amber, and this is across all of the committees. The first was the amber ones are that we will ensure committee papers are completed on time, for which we've had some late papers arrive, and that the papers, secondly, that the papers are short, focused and succinct. And whilst we acknowledge significant improvement, there are some specific areas requiring for committees requiring improvement further. And finally, in terms of involving the staff networks to contribute, in particular, in this instance, to the People Committee, there was a scheduled invite that was not fulfilled on EDI discovery session to the last People Committee, which had to be deferred. So in those respects, we missed the targets on those we will statements. However, as I say, the rest were rated green. Finally, the standing financial instructions were reviewed and recommended to the board for approval. And then in the area of assurance, from the internal audit, BDO completed two reports at the last audit committee, one on an efficiency programme and one on sexual safety, both with moderate assurance, which continues a sort of trend of positive assurance being provided. I think it is worth noting that the sexual safety one, although they focused heavily on the process and the positive improvements on the process, they did include some surveys which highlighted some continuing areas of concern. And so I think we should not sit on our laurels with our moderate assurance, but recognise that there are still continuing issues to deal with on that front, and that there is continuing improvement required despite that moderate assurance being provided. And then thirdly, they also updated us on the IT review, for which they rated limited assurance. So just by way of background, you may recall, I think in 2023, we had a couple of significant outages, as a result of which an independent review was commissioned. And that report focused very heavily on the sort of management and governance and processes within IT, and came up with a series of recommendations. But we were obviously concerned about the reasons behind the outages as well, primarily. And the situations, as we stand at the moment, the reasons for those outages were, I think, associated with the incompatibility of the networks at Medway versus here, and that has been resolved. However, there were a whole series, as I say, of improvements in governance and management of the IT, for which those actions had not been completed, and that's why we only got limited assurance. Having said all that, of course, we now have a new director of information and IT, and most specifically an improvement plan to go alongside that, and we are assured on that improvement plan that it will then deliver all those improvements that were set out in that original recommendation list. So we're proposing that we have an audit in about a year's time or so once that has bedded in. The other items are risk management, where the committee remains assured that the arrangements are in place to support effective risk management, so that was good. And likewise on information governance, as reflected in the latest annual governance statement. So IG awareness we are comfortable with. And those are, on the advisory, we had an update on counter fraud, but nothing particular to raise on that front. That's it, thank you.
Thanks, Howard. That's very clear. Can I ask any questions that people would like to ask of Howard? Okay, can I use my prerogative, Chair? Two questions I've got. One is, there's inevitability about internal audit, the way in which they do their work. They will focus, as you quite rightly said, on the process of the system. What their standards don't always require them to look at the ultimate outcome, which they see as part of executive management. There was some reference there, Howard, to they did do a survey, and there were some ongoing concerns. That's not unusual when you've got an improvement programme. It takes time to bed in. So I know the programme that we're putting in place to support sexual safety is the right programme. I suppose my question is, and I don't know if this is Margaret or Max, what's your take about when will we know that we're really making a difference here within the organisation? Have we got a broad indication of what timescale that we're talking about?
Chair, I'll hand this over to Sarah, if that's okay, who's taking
Yeah,
the
of
lead
course,
for
certainly.
this.
Sorry, Sarah. Thank you. Sorry, and I should say, Sarah, I know you are the executive lead for this particular programme, so yeah.
Thank you, Michael. So I think where we are is we've got a sexual safety steering group in place now with a number of workshops sort of planned to accelerate our response to sexual safety issues. So I think we've got a very clear plan that went to the People Committee around the immediate priorities for Q3 and Q4. And some of that is about launching the sort of listening and engagement tools to make sure that we are hearing from staff stories, using staff stories to respond to concerns. And we've got a much better link now with FTSU as well around responding to concerns and any complaints. I think it's an ongoing challenge for many organisations, I think, and one that we are absolutely focused on to build that culture around inclusion so that staff know the boundaries and to deal with those.
Okay, thank you. Max, please. I appreciate your chair of people committees.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I think when we look at the demonstration of impact and improvement on that plan, it isn't going to be, we need to take a holistic view, and as such at the last Audit and Risk Committee we did discuss about having a culture work stream, as it were, of the internal audit plan. So I think that deep dive and expertise from the auditors will really help, as well as our own gambit of wide-ranging listening mechanisms in the organisation. So I think we will see that progress, but we need to go for the right data points to do that.
Okay, thank you. I'm very assured by that. And my final question really is, again, I know I'm jumping all over the place and we may come to this in the agenda. I was interested in the review that Internal Audit did about the governance of the information security and all of the digital. There's an inevitable question if you're a member of the public. Well, I hear all that. I hear what's happened with, you know, the supply chain for Land Rover. It's a very difficult one, Nick, so sorry to put you on the spot, but as we go into winter, what assurance can you give to members of the public who might be listening that, you know, we're really on the risk of any digital failure, which could impact on our ability to deliver services?
Thank you, Michael. Yes, and I found the audit report, which obviously kicked off before I joined, but we took time with Audit Committee's agreement to review some of the original responses to it and get a more up-to-date position, and that gave us a very good action plan. With regard to cyber, we have made some additional careful interventions to improve our position further. Some of that is around our capability and our capacity. So we have brought in additional senior expertise in this area, and we are also working with the Southern Ambulance Service collaboration on some specific further capability to recognise, as you noted, Michael, Jaguar Land Rover, Marks and Spencer's Co-op, recently a nursery chain or that was had a cyber attack. We cannot guarantee not to have an attack. What's really important is that we do everything that we can to identify it very quickly and to have a very good response process so that we recover quickly should such a thing happen. And so we're focusing very much now on, as Howard mentioned, getting very strong compatibility between our two key sites so that we can switch from one to the other very quickly and easily if there's a problem, but also to put in place 24/7, 365 monitoring at a greater level so that our response capability is much, much better. So I can provide limited assurance, as every organisation in the country will, against the possibility of cyber attack. But I think that we are moving in a strong direction to deal with any such attack.
Thank you. That's very clear, and I fully accept. This will happen. It's as you say, it's our ability to recover as quickly as possible. So it's clear that you're on this, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. Can I now turn to the next agenda item, which Max, you're going to give feedback from the Shadow Board, please.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Chair. We had our third meeting of the Shadow Board on Tuesday of this week, where we transacted the business of the Shadow Board. It was probably the second meeting where we'd done that. So the first was more by way of induction, and the last two have been really looking at papers and hot topics, including those papers coming to board today, and discussing them and sharing the views of the Shadow Board. The Shadow Board was pleased to see their feedback from the last meeting reflected in the Chief Exec's report. They felt that today's report was all the richer for it, balancing updates on delivery against strategy and important projects, with also the extensive and important internal and external engagement undertaken by the Chief and his team. All of that underscores our role as system partner. Shadow Board received and discussed 3 papers. Firstly, the Winter Plan. We received a presentation from James Pavey. The Shadow Board welcomed the opportunity to learn more about how the Winter Plan comes to pass, why it's such an important part of our annual planning cycle, and the breadth and depth of collaboration with partners, healthcare and more widely that goes into ensuring system-wide winter readiness, and the criticality of that collaboration. They welcomed the report and offered questions and challenges relating to a couple of points of clarity, but also seeking reassurance around Powered Hood's PPE availability for operational colleagues in time for the Winter Plan, as well as discussing any risks to delivery of the plan associated with the ongoing transformation in HR. The second paper related to models of care. Received an excellent presentation from Magnus Nelson. I think we could have spent all day listening to him explain all the various models of care. And it was really helpful build to coalesce the learnings of the Shadow Board on strategy and the deeper dive into the trust strategy that they'd made in the previous session as almost a further layer of detail and action. Questions and comments from the Shadow Board related to how the models of care will be integrated into clinicians' scope of practice, such as training physical clinicians in virtual care, how the Trust is influencing education partners such as undergrad and postgrad to ensure those new skills and capabilities are baked into their courses, especially the universities who are producing the paramedics of the future, but also how the Trust is using data within the organisation, such as from the frequent caller team, to shape these models of care and their implementation. It provided a really helpful segue into the next paper, which related to the education strategy, where we were joined by Ash Richardson. He took the Shadow Board through the emerging direction of travel in education. As you know, one of the many strengths of the Shadow Board is its diversity, for instance, in terms of clinical and non-clinical professional backgrounds, and this was really helpful in discussing this paper. The group welcomed the Trust's ambition for education and the direction of travel, but were really keen to seek reassurance that it was a holistic education strategy, i.e. for non-clinicians and corporate functions too. And we discussed a current imbalance between the training offer across those different colleague groups. And the other point was around ensuring that time is created for colleagues to fully engage with the right training in the right way at the right time, because that will be critical to its success. We also then discussed one of the Shadow Board's members' experience of observing last week's People Committee, the first Shadow member to do so, and how we maximise that opportunity to observe, learn and input and provide insights moving forward. I hope I've done justice to the conversations on Tuesday. I'd probably summarise that while Shadow Board is still in its early days, its members are already demonstrating real commitment and curiosity to their roles, finding their feet and their voice, and are being very generous with their time and engagement with the programme. So I'd like to both take this opportunity to welcome those here today, but also thank the cohort more widely for their continued contribution. Thank you.
Max, that's a very rich discussion, and particularly, take away the points on data and how we use it within the organisation and the influence on our models of care. So I think that's really excellent. Can I ask members of Shadow Board, is there anything you want to say? I don't know whether I'm allowed to do this, but I am going to do it anyway. So is there anything you think that's been missed here, actually? No? That's good. And genuine thanks for your contribution to this. It is really, really important. And it's important that as we go forward, you begin to feel that you're having a real impact because it's your organisation. But can I ask my board colleagues, are there anything you'd like to pick up on? Any question? Or no? Okay, thank you. Really excellent, really. And Janine, I think we talked about this. I think I don't know how many trusts have got this. I've got experience of shadow boards in other organisations, but I think this is relatively new for the ambulance sector, is it? Or do we know? Sorry.
Yes, we, I think, are the only ambulance service to have a shadow board operating currently, and actually the only NHS trust to operate a shadow board in the way that we have chosen to do it. So some organisations use it as a kind of stepping stone for deputy directors to progress to board level. We wanted very much a different approach. So, very proud of how it's progressing so far. And my thanks also to our shadow board members. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. My final note is from experience in other organisations where I've seen a shadow board, I've had a member of the executive there say, shadow board really made my life a bit difficult. They really challenged me. So that's my marker of success. You come and tell me when you've made their life difficult. In a constructive, and don't forget the values, it's important that we are kind and everything. But thank you very much to Max and this really good initiative. Thank you. So Simon, over to you, please.
Thanks, Michael. Morning, everyone. This is the second half of the year now. I think officially we're in October, so that starts us in what is commonly referred to in the NHS as half two. I had the opportunity as half two started to go along to a national NHS leaders event, which we heard from the Chief Exec of the NHS, Jim Mackey, and also from the Secretary of State. And it's pretty clear that there were three charges, three asks of us in this half, which should frame what the NHS is up to. The first, and it was demonstrably clear that this was something that we would be asked to make sure that we were absolutely assured as a board that we would be good on, is delivering upon the money. It was clear that the NHS exits half one in probably the best place it's been collectively, but it must carry on with the work of rebuilding confidence that it will deliver its operational plans. The second, and we have it on our agenda today, was winter. And the difference this year as we consider the winter plan is that boards, traditionally what we've done in the NHS over the last number of years is we've had any number of dialogues with regions, we've made submissions, those submissions have been sort of marked, and then we've had iterations of those going backwards and forth. And very consciously the NHS is emphasising the role of boards in signing off those submissions rather than them being signed off, so to speak, by the region. So I'd invite us all to think about that as we enter that discussion today. One thing we can all do to help get ready for winter is vaccination. We were, I think, pretty much near the top of the league last year, so no pressure, Margaret. When do we start vaccinating? Remind me.
They arrived last week, so we're rolling out. We'll be going.
But I would say to everybody watching, listening, everybody this is the thing that you can do to help us have a better winter. It is as simple as that. So if you are eligible for a vaccination through your work, through your health conditions, through your age, please take it up. It's something we can all do for each other. We're going to hear in a minute about some of the work we're doing clinically to progress our models of care. And so it feels appropriate to draw attention now to the fact that we're gearing up. Is that a joke in there? I don't know. But Restart Your Heart Day on the 16th of October is coming up. And we've got public events taking place in Brighton, Ramsgate and Tunbridge Wells. And something else we can all do is sign up to the Good Sam app. So I'm taking an opportunity to shamelessly plug that here. We'll no doubt come back to that in our conversation. And in this very room last week, the executive team had a session with Dave Hawkins and Danny Dixon, two brilliant educators and also trainers, on how to do CPR. I have to say it got a little bit too competitive for my liking, but nonetheless, we all engaged in it and have signed up. So do sign up to the Good Sam app. It will be coming out on the Zone. It's another thing we can all do for each other. And we know still in our communities we have too many witnessed cardiac arrests where we don't intervene for whatever reason. And this is, again, something that we can all do for each other. It's also important to draw attention to in the context of our ongoing work. And I think, you know, our freedom to speak up is like painting the fourth bridge. It's never done. As soon as you think you've done, you just need to start again, but in a different place. And Freedom to Speak Up Week, week is upon us. It's on the 13th to the 17th of October this year. And the theme for this year to highlight to you is Follow Up in Action, which is we all have a responsibility to act on what we hear. And to that end, I know, and I will be bringing back in due course, the desire that as we embed our new divisional culture, that we have Freedom to Speak Up champions embedded across the organisation in those divisions. We've had a bit of a tradition in CCAM of saying the only thing that you can do is do it centrally, but in actual fact, embedding that culture of local resolution, local conversation is so important. So follow up in action isn't only what we do here, it's what's done in each of our OUs, each of our sites, wherever they may be. A third thing to draw attention to, I think, is awards season is upon us. In fact, the first one is next week. I'm getting into a groove with these now. It's like I know the place to go. It's Denby's is the first one up, the Surrey one next week. We've got 170 people, I think, booked to attend. Why am I drawing attention to that here? Well, for the first time, and I think it's a signal moment, we will be presenting the Long Service Medal to our EOC staff, and isn't that a great thing to be able to celebrate and do? We're going to be spending quite a lot of time thinking about that over the weeks and months ahead, I know, but their contribution, they are the people who the public encounter often for the first moment when they're ringing the ambulance service. And so not only will it be great to honour their contribution and all the work that they do, it also gives me an opportunity to say here, thank you to all of them for the work that they do. And I know, I've read the stories, how much the voices that are at the end of those phones mean to our patients in terms of managing what is perhaps some of the most terrifying moments of anybody's life. So to all our colleagues who are picking up phones, be they in the ones, the nines, be they in the clinical validation, be in the callbacks, just thank you for what you do. Finally, for those of you who are here, it would be remiss of me not to draw attention to the fact that we've just launched our charity this morning. I'm very grateful to the High Sheriffs for their support of the charity. Again, I link to the fact that one of the missions of the charity is to promote education in our communities. So it's really important that and we'll talk about this directly, your colleagues around the table may remember that when we had this session earlier on in the board this year, we talked about hard to reach communities or communities that didn't necessarily have the same access to public access defibrillators as others. That's still an issue for us, and we've got to really address it. Launching the charity is a concrete step in that direction, and the grant that Vicky referred to is actually going to allow us to employ somebody whose mission will be to help us address that very issue. So important steps that we can take, and I hope that when we come back in 6 months' time, in a year's time, we'll be reporting progress on that and the difference that we can make. I also draw a line to the fact that we need to improve representation in our volunteers, in our CFRs, from all the communities that we serve. We have a vibrant community of CFRs, as you all know, but I would like to think that we can do more on that space going forward. Michael's already referred to Steve, and so this gives me an opportunity to add my thanks to him. The role of an improvement director is one of the most tricky ones to balance in the NHS. You're both in the organisation and you have to be close enough to it to have the relationships that matter. But you also have to be honest enough and have the degree of balance to know that you're also there on behalf of the system. And that's why it's such a tricky role to manage. And Steve has managed that with aplomb. We are better and indeed considerably down to the contributions that he's made to this board, to people around this table, that we came out of RSP earlier on this year, and we were fortunate to have his services retained for a 6-month period. I think now a hard guillotine has been put upon that. We're going to have an opportunity to hear from Steve's reflections, because obviously, to draw out, before Steve was our improvement director, he was actually our director of nursing, and he reminds me of the fact that, you know, some of the issues that we have dealt with are long in gestation, and particularly as we look forward into, you know, some of the issues that we will deal with when we have a well-led review, that history which he holds, I think has been incredibly valued to us all. And I'd end by saying, as a chief executive, he's also been an invaluable support of guidance and counsel and wisdom. So my personal gratitude to him for all of that. That's everything I would like to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. And, you know, I never cease to be amazed when you read your report, the amount of things that are going on in CCAM and the role that we're playing. So, you know, well done to all of the executive, and I mean that generally. I just open the floor. Any questions for Simon? Howard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to raise a question on something else in your paper that you haven't mentioned, and that's the National Oversight Framework League Tables. I have to admit to being completely curious as to this league table in terms of the metrics, because we've gone through a lot of effort ourselves to come up with what we think are the key metrics for the organisation. And we're presented here with a set of metrics which look to me to be fairly random for an assessment of the ambulance services. Most particularly does not include cardiac arrest survival rates, which I would have thought was pretty important for an ambulance service. Does not include any patient experience metric, and on the staff survey picks up, rather than being an overall staff survey, it picks up 2 very specific questions. So to me it seems a random set of metrics on which to compare us, and although we have come out reasonably well, 4th, it just, the whole thing was a bit of a surprise to me, and I was just curious as to what on earth's going on. Why have we not been told it? I wouldn't like personally to have been assessed on a set of metrics of my performance if I had not been told what they were in advance. So just very curious. Thank you.
It's a really good question. Thank you, Howard. I mean, I think we did have that discussion at the National Leaders event, and I think there is a genuine desire on behalf of the politicians and the national leaders to make information more democratically available. Colleagues with long memories will recall this is not the first time the NHS has had leaked tables, and there is a desire to return to, with this current government, publishing that information and making it transparently available and having conversations based on that information. As with any mass data comparisons, when you're comparing an entire country, you will have limitations on what you choose to use. I am assured that the metrics have been carefully considered. Are they ones we might have chosen for ourselves? No. But they do start to invite a conversation about some of the key things that our political leaders and also the national NHS think we should be focused on. And I'll come back to the staff survey in a second because I forgot to mention that. How we're doing on our staff survey, how we're doing on money, you didn't mention that, but I would draw it out here. And although the quality of care indicators might not be those that we choose, I am assured that, you know, in the commissioning space, our commissioners are now starting to look at precisely the issue that you raised about commissioning us to clinical outcomes through that strategic commissioning framework going forward. The last thing I would say is I expect these metrics to continue to evolve. I don't think it's a static piece. I think the desire to get something started and something transparent was the driver, and I support that. And we need to then use our influencing to make sure that that continues to evolve in a way that we would like. And I should say, on the staff survey, I forgot to mention it, so I will take the opportunity to say this. Our staff survey, we haven't got the results yet, but it's important to sort of indicate the level of engagement in the organisation. So at week 3 and heading towards the end of week 3, we're already at 42%. That's double where we were this time last year. So that is indicating that the level of engagement, people's willingness and desire to contribute their opinions to the organisation is double what it was last year. So we do now have a very accurate data set, and I think one of the really impressive things about that is not being us pushing it, and I think Janine would speak to this. It's, in actual fact, this is another example of local colleagues picking up the baton with this and having those conversations locally. Our success in this space is not what do we find out at a central point, it's what curiosity do people have about their local teams and what they are saying to them. So I just wanted to add that just because you raised the staff survey.
Mochkan, please.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the report. Enjoyed reading the variety of bits of information in there. I was really interested in reading about your engagement around the 10-year health plan, particularly in terms of neighbourhood models. In section 9, you highlight one specific challenge in terms of the structures and fitting in with localised model. I'd be really interested in hearing more about the challenges that the ambulance services have identified. Thank you. And sorry, one last thing. You mentioned in your report about Freedom to Speak Up Week. October is also the Black History Month, and I attended the Inspire networking group 2 days ago, and they're planning some really good events during October that may be worth sharing. Thank you.
Thank you for both of those points. I think neighbourhood health, I've been asked to represent the ambulance sector on the National Neighbourhood Health Group. So there's a limit to what I can actually say in public, just if I sound a little bit more caveated, because material that is being shared is pre-publication. So what can I say? I think there are two challenges I would light on. The first is restoring public confidence in neighbourhood health services more generally. I think one of the things that the ambulance sector would still talk about, and I did have the opportunity to say, is that too many people ring us because they believe there isn't a viable alternative. And until we break the back of that conversation, we're not going to see that demand shift in a way that people feel comfortable with. So when I ring somebody local, do I get a response that I believe in, that I meet, that I feel meets my needs, critically that is timely? And I think the second challenge I'll draw out is that much of what channels through the health service funnel, so to speak, could be met by doing different things with partners. So I think the success of neighbourhood health will be felt in how well do partners come together across health and social care and the third sector, because many of the problems that wind their way to our door can and should be managed elsewhere. To the extent that neighbourhood health and its implementation is successful, and then there's a real practical challenge, I think a lot of the ideas that are contained in that part of the plan are really great ones. I'm wholly supportive of them, but there is something about how can we scale this so quickly enough that people feel this isn't just another set of words. The government's announced, I think, 43 pilot sites, but 43 pilot sites across a country of our size is a great start, but it will need to scale to every community. And then the final thing I'd say is we're talking about, our patch is a really good example of this, hugely differentiated communities ranging from the highly rural to the highly urban. Neighbourhood health needs to reflect the differences that will be needed to respond to those needs too, because it's great if you are in, Brighton with a conurbation that connects you to everything pretty much instantly, but if you're in the middle of, I don't know, somebody else pick a random village of remoteness in our patch, if you're in the middle of that, does neighbourhood health mean something to you, or does it mean the only thing I've still got to do is call an ambulance? And until it means something for everyone, I think it's not as inclusive as I would like it to be.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you. A really good question. Thank you. There's so much, Simon, in your report that we could go on and on, but I'm conscious of the agenda. So unless there are any other questions, I was going to propose that we now move on to Liz's report on the work of the Patient Quality Committee.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to take the paper as read. I'm just going to highlight a couple of areas in terms of the Quality Patient Safety Committee that was recently held. I think just to clarify that at the start of the committee, we do undertake a review of the risk register, and I was joined by my fellow Neds, Mojgan and Subo, who were forensic in their testing of the risk register this time round, so thank you both for that. And we did note some gaps within that were lacking clear actions and timeframes that were out of date. So we did ask our execs who were present to ensure colleagues take ownership of those risks. There were no significant issues arising out of the risk register or the IQR, and indeed a number of areas showed improvement, such as myocardial infarction, package of care, patient group directives and cardiac survival, which I'm certain, as I've seen Dan's in the room, that he will cover under the models of care a bit later as well. We also noted that there are some recent changes impacting our obligations around duty of candour, which our execs are working through with AACE, and we will get an update on that in November. In terms of alert, I think we've raised before, is our risk around the EOC, the challenges that we have had with the EOC, And in response to that, a quality summit was held in August. And that was really related to the capability and capacity of staff working in integrated care. It was considered through the lens of quality improvement and was supported by Margaret and the QI team. And it prompted really positive colleague engagement. The related action plan will be reviewed in November, and I think just to assure the board that we will keep a focus on this, on the outcomes and the action. As I say, this has been an area of concern for some time, and I would ask all of the board to wrap their support around the EOC, and I think Simon's mentioned it previously, but the demand for them is ever increasing and the responsibilities in that team is ever increasing. So our focus will remain on them. Models of care I won't focus on because we're going to lead into that next. But we had a really helpful and constructive review of this key strategic priority, and we reviewed the 3 focus models of care. And we were reasonably assured with the progress, noting that fall as an end of life, and we're going to cover end of life next, were 2 of the models identified to have a specific focus because of their specific challenges and the response required from our community health around this. But progress has been limited, but also we looked at the dependencies of our CFRs was explored, and it was great to see them at the annual members meeting, showing what they can do and how they can help and respond to our fallers. And this is also reflected in our volunteer strategy that's coming to the board in December. In terms of assurance, the patient safety incident response framework compliance, we were assured around our PSERF compliance, and we are meeting 90% of the standards, with recent closed investigations evidencing competence, consistency and strong governance. I think it was also great to see that during our recent CQC visit, our inspectors were able to have that conversation out there in our units. People knew what PSERF was. They could explain and understand it. And therefore we felt that was great feedback in terms of how we've implemented this across the trust. There is wider training still going on for all our learning response methods. Improvement plans are in place, including a renewed patient safety plan, and in-house modular training and recruitment of both a patient safety partner and a safety improvement specialist to ensure that we are learning from our incidents and events. Annual reports that we saw, we had great annual reports, they're included in the pack. So we had annual safeguarding, our IPC annual report, and we've mentioned our flu vaccination rate, which was fantastic across England to have the highest flu vaccination. And I'm certain the coffee voucher incentive made a huge difference in that. But we also had the focus on future hand hygiene and a QI project around that. We also had our research annual report, which had amazing contact, and it was great to see Prof. Julia at our annual members meeting actually sharing the learnings and from our research programme. This makes such a difference to the care that we're able to deliver to patients, not just in CCAM, but across all the ambulance trusts in England. Just to advise, our divisional quality leads are now in place. They attended, they are very motivated in terms of what they will be able to achieve working alongside the divisions, and they are now working on the refreshed quality assurance and engagement visit model and the quality governance blueprint. So it was great to see that. We reviewed our quality account priorities, and our clinical leads attended on that around our severe mental illness aim, our maternity aim, which is ensuring continuity of care for women from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And it was really interesting in terms of the evidence that Dawn, our consultant midwife, had collected around how our staff feel uncomfortable asking our patients of ethnic origin. And I can see people nodding in the room. And to link this to actually the care we can deliver to patients, because we know our Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, particularly in a maternity scenario, do require increased levels of pain relief. If we don't understand their ethnic background, we can't deliver the right care, and those patients can't get the right quality outcomes. So this is a really important area that we're now focusing on, along with the different areas of inequalities, and this will be set out again back to the committee in November. Then lastly, patient monitoring DFibs, and we ask for further assurance of the alignment of the procurement of the new ambulances with the new DFibs. We understand that that has now gone out to tender, and it is in train because it has been a problem child over about 18 months, but that is now progressing and moving forward. And I'm happy to take any questions with support from my colleagues and the exec who were there. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Liz. That's really, really comprehensive. And, you know, I just two things to take from that is, one, really pleased to see the local quality leads and how that's consistent with our devolved strategy, so that they can be outward looking at the communities they serve. That is really excellent, and really, really struck by the point that you made about awareness of the different needs of our communities, particularly in ethnic minority, and the point that you made about pain relief and the importance of the way in which we engage with those are really, really important. Before I open it for questions, I'm just going to ask executive colleagues if there's anything they would want to respond to. I don't want to stop you doing this, but I would like to get quickly onto models of care. So unless there's something that you really would like to challenge or say anything, no? Okay, that's a really good test. Thank you. Any questions of Liz at this point, please? Actually, you've stunned them to silence with your so thank you very much. Can I now move on, though? This is, as I said at the very beginning, we are very much focused on the next 6 months, the winter challenges, and I'm really pleased, Richard, you're going to lead a discussion with Imogen, Vicky and Dan on the 3 models of care. So over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's a great pleasure to introduce our colleagues, Dan, Vicky and Imogen, but also Jen, who's dialed in on screen. She's on her non-CCAM day today, and she's dialed in to help us with the end-of-life care question and answer session, should there be any questions as well, which is great. Just to remind board colleagues that we've got 11 models of care, which are all designed to support the implementation of our trust strategy over the next 3 to 5 years, and we've chosen 3 focus models of care for this year. This is an update from the 3 areas, but just to remind us that there are several work streams that sit under each of the models of care, and we haven't got time to go through every single work stream today, so our colleagues are bringing a flavour of the development since our last board meeting and progress that we've made. And I know everyone's happy to answer any questions about those models of care. If you are interested in a particular area, we can welcome you to a model of care group so that you can find out some more detail about that. I'll just hand over. I think Imogen's going to start with end-of-life care.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you as one of the 2 end-of-life care leads for the Trust about our update for this particular model of care. Since the last meeting, we have created a dashboard. Our very excellent colleague, Catherine Holmes, has created a dashboard for the model of care for us, and our help is also with Katie behind me as well. Thank you. So what we have discovered, quite interesting actually, is that most of the calls that we get for end-of-life care seem to occur between 9 in the morning and 11 in the morning on the weekdays, and I think we all assumed that it would be more weekend out of hours. So that was quite interesting. It's very much also an even spread throughout the week. The highest, interesting though, the highest amount of medicines administration, so the medicines that we give at the end of life, we seem to be doing out of hours. So what we're getting called for in hours is very different to what we're getting called out of hours, which is quite interesting. So if we're not giving the meds during the day, then then what is going on during the day? Why are people calling us then? And we did kind of postulate perhaps that the GPs tend to open at 8:30, and if people can't quite get the response that they wanted, or the GP has just said, well, look, we can't help you, please call an ambulance, or there's no appointments available. So we thought perhaps that had something to do with it. Also, most hospices tend to hold an early morning meeting around 8:45, 8:30, and then come to the conclusion that perhaps they need to be the person needs to be in the hospice or potentially needs more help. And unfortunately, it does tend to seem that we get the calls, which isn't always appropriate. So again, we were quite surprised that the calls were mostly during the week. Interestingly, the Kent calls were mainly at the weekend, and the Surrey and Sussex demand was more evenly spread throughout the week. And we can't quite understand the difference in that area just yet, but we are working on trying to understand why it should be so different in Kent. The good news is the 82.6% of the end-of-life jobs were registrant-led, which is one of the highest of all the models of care, one of the highest numbers. And actually, the ones that weren't registrant-led were literally just, can you please bring this person into the hospice, which would be the urgent treatment vehicle, and therefore not registrant-led. So actually, that's quite a positive take-home. The average job cycle time for an end-of-life care job is 1 hour and 52 minutes, which is longer than we would like. But we know this is a problem because these jobs are often very, very complex. We have a 78% see and treat rate, but actually the overarching aim of this particular model of care is to completely flip that, because actually what we should be seeing is we should only be really being called for the true palliative care emergencies, which would involve being either taken to a hospice or a hospital, as opposed to just being treated at home, being called for JIC administration, for instance, is not part of our commission work. And I'd like to, at this particular point, bring in something that happened to me this morning. I'm also not only the end-of-life care lead, but I'm also a practicing paramedic on the road. And this morning, at 7 o'clock this morning, I received a Category 1 call to attend. I'm actually on the single response vehicle, to attend a 93-year-old female who is end-of-life. It got categorised as a Category 1 because she was unconscious with noisy breathing. And I went, an ambulance went, and the critical care paramedic went. I managed to get the other two resources stood down once I was on scene. But, the poor gentleman on scene who was trying to care for his mother did not know who else to call besides us to give the JIC medicines. And this is, to have to call 999 at the end of life is a system failure. And we really shouldn't be involved. And this chap, I was able to help and refer him to the correct people going forward. So in theory, he shouldn't need to call us again. But this particular incident just really highlighted to me, this is the problem that we've got, is that people just do not know who else to pick up the phone to. Thank you. So the next slide shows the resuscitation attempts in patients who actually had a DNR, which in theory means, of course, they should never have received resuscitation at all. This research we've managed to get with huge thanks to Amelia Taylor and Emma Widborn, who have the funded research from the NIHR. Without that particular funded research, we wouldn't be able to get this information. So it really is very important that we continue to have access to these sorts of things to allow us to get the data. So a big take home on that. We've been asked to focus on this as we know how inappropriate resuscitation is a common adverse incident in end-of-life care for ambulance services. Data pulled from the Cardiac Arrest Registry for the 2024 calendar year, there was 1,827 patients in cardiac arrest who had a DNA CPR. 377 of those, that's 20%, received a resuscitation attempt. 87% of the attempts were initiated over the phone, and that is no disrespect to the EOC colleagues, but as long as Pathways is telling them to suggest that they start resuscitation, there is very little that can be done. So we really need to focus on that. And indeed, that incident this morning never needed to be a C1, but of course it was, because unconscious, noisy breathing. And then, unfortunately, 36% of those patients then went on to have a resus attempt by our own crews. And the themes around that, very much of crews feeling unconfident to say this person doesn't need to be resuscitated, or if there was a DNR, which we know in this case that was the case, fortunately they had no access to the DNR because the patient very often is not PDS matched for a C1, because of course the EOC EMA has other things to contend with. And we don't have access to always the shared care records, which I will come on to a bit more in a minute. So 68% of these calls were taken out of hours, which you would expect, but then of course that means that 42% were taken, 30, thank you. Maths has never been my strong suit, but you get the point, that were taken in hours. So why do people in hours feel the need to call 999 for a cardiac arrest when this person has a DNA CPR? And actually perhaps the most alarming of all of this is the nursing home group, where 51 of these 378 patients were resuscitated in a nursing home with a registrant-led care, still for some reason doing CPR. And as a responding crew member, what I'm told is, oh, well, we didn't just think we should let them die. Well, of course, you always want to help people, but the whole point of having a do not resuscitate order is that we do not resuscitate. And this should be a never event. Significantly, though, fewer inappropriate resuscitations were taken place in the Worthing operational dispatch area. And interestingly, we believe the reason for this is that they have a single point of access, i.e. the echo call down on the south coast. And this, we feel, gives the perhaps colleagues and families the assurance of having someone they can call besides us, which goes back to Simon's point of why people feel that we're the only possible resource, but down in the Worthing area that it is someone that they can call and get advice, and not to start resuscitation. So we asked Catherine Holmes, as part of the dashboard, to pull the 50 longest on-scene times for our model of care. And what we expected to find actually was very different to what we did find. I personally audited these calls myself. I managed to do 42 of the 50. Interestingly, all of these jobs turned out to be a conveyance overall. And what we expected to find was quite different. We expected that the crews were on scene for a long time, just trying to make someone comfortable, or they were waiting to perhaps the patient to die. So they felt that, but actually no. These patients were all conveyed either to a hospice, a care home, or a hospital. So 20 of the 42 patients admitted directly to hospice, but this took several phone calls to instigate. Most of the time because the crews have recognised this person is dying, and that actually ED is the last possible place that they should be. And of course hospices don't always have the access to bring them in very quickly, so of course it takes time to go away and do a multidisciplinary discussion and then to bring the patient in, so that leaves lengthy scene times. And then 26 of these 42 cases also were, again, in hours. So why should that be? Why have we ended up there in terms of, in fact, there were other community resources available at that point. 33 of the 42 were known end-of-life care. Again, why are we involved? But the main theme that came over in general, particularly the ones that ended up in the ED, unfortunately, was just, very respectfully to our GP colleagues, the disagreement with GPs, or the lack of the GP willing to wish to take responsibility for the person dying at home, and afraid of how they're going to certify the death. And also the scrutiny from the medical examiners. A lot of GPs say this process has actually made their jobs much harder, and they therefore would not feel comfortable certifying this person's death. And that, unfortunately, is a theme as to why this person has ended up in the emergency department, as opposed to just being left at home and made comfortable, which I think was probably one of the biggest, I suppose, jarring moments for me, actually. With no disrespect to my GP colleagues, who, of course, are under a great deal of stress themselves. So our next steps is that we are planning a meeting with the local Integrated Care Board and the commissioning leads. And this is actually planned, I believe, for the 8th of October next week. And also alongside our CCAM strategic partnerships join this. Aim is to discuss the data and our findings so far and to make clear our position in terms of non-commissioned workload, identify areas to work collaboratively on the model of care targets. I know that there was a particular question as to, what is commissioned and what is not commissioned for us. We are currently working through that. But the struggle to define the non-commissioned end-of-life care workload is within the data of significant variables and under-reporting. So the problem is when the crews fill out the EPCRs, they will very often put the reason for the call as dyspnea, so the outcome code or the patient condition code as dyspnea or chest pain or another. And actually what they should be doing is coding it as either end of life or actively dying or palliative care. This would then give us a much better data pool. But we are waiting for that. And the key skills has gone out, and the message to the crews to say, can you please code these events correctly? And then we are hopefully therefore going to see more data come back. And actually we have given Catherine Holmes a new set of data variants to pull the information through, and we should have those very shortly. We have managed to get time in key skills this year, and includes trying to make the crews aware of their protracted scene times, but also in terms of the adult death procedures, we have written a new policy procedure around that, which has been now is in trust policy. And this means that we should be seeing a lot less of crews remaining stuck on the scene with a decedent. There's now a clear path for the crews to take. And we're hoping that the key skills will see a reduction in the amount of time left on scene with the deceased. And also we are hoping a zero conveyance to mortuaries, which creates a lot of problems with the coroner going forwards. We also need to work on the shared care records side of things, as IRIS we know is being phased out, and we already know that we're resuscitating people who've got DNRs. So it's very important that we work towards making sure that crews know this person's got a DNR and that they're able to see it. And I believe that the Kent and Medway system works very well, and we're hoping that that's something we're going to have more access to going forward. And so I think that's me. Thank you very much indeed. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. I would compliment you on the clarity in which you've conveyed the important work that you're doing. And just generally before to start, I hope you take as read the tremendous thanks that the whole of this board has for the work that you and your colleagues are doing in this area. Very difficult, but it's a really important service, so thank you for that. I have got a few questions, but can I open it first for some questions of individuals, please? Suzanne, or was it Howard? I don't know. Suzanne.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Michael. Imogen, hi, I'm Suzanne O'Brien. I've recently joined the board. I chair the Finance and Investment Committee. Just to echo what Michael said, fantastically well presented, very clear. I enjoyed reading it, actually. Insofar as I could translate it into what this service does and understand the impact that we have on our community. And it did occur to me that we really, as a board, need to track this, particularly in the context of an ageing population. Because it is, and I also appreciate the sensitivity with which you spoke about GPs. It's a very difficult topic. I think it's a really difficult topic that as a nation and as humans we struggle to come to grips with. Because of the signalling around it. So that's really what I wanted to do, and also just commend you, because often what I see is data, whereas you have very neatly translated data into insights in a way that'll be really useful for us. And I'd very much like the board to have an action that we revisit this and track this and see if the interventions that we put in place are actually yielding tangible results. So thanks, Imogen. Thank you, Michael.
And thank you for the challenge about the data, which is well made. Sorry, actually.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Wow, really insightful presentation. Thank you. A couple of things, or a number of things come out of it, but one of the things that I had noticed in your next steps, and I was aware of the models of care that are going on in Sussex in particular, the review of the models of care, and in particular end-of-life care in this instance. I notice you're going to see them, but should that be much more involved in the process, since they're reviewing that at the same time? Perhaps you could just comment on your engagement with them or any other ICBs in our patch. So that was my first question. The second question is that you've identified some really good ideas, the Worthing Echo and the Kent system being better than the others. And how do we facilitate those good ideas and good practice being spread across our patch so that everybody can benefit from those great ideas? Thank you.
Thank you. I will endeavour to answer the questions, but I also, Jen's also on as well. She might be able to answer some of them better than I can, but I shall give it a good go. So in terms of working with our ICBs, it's not just Sussex. We are going to work with all of them, and we have regular meetings with them to try and understand, why is it that people feel that it's us that they get the better response, and what are your specific issues, essentially what are you going to do about it? Because we can't carry on. We can't carry on like this. We can't be sending 3 ambulances out to go and give jigs. So does that answer that particular?
Yes, it does. I mean, you're right. When we talk about the GPs and their response, they are in a better position than we are to have that discussion with them to get the right answer here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it just seems that sometimes there's not enough time taken to explain to the patients and their families that don't call an ambulance, you need to call these people. And again, it's just having the time to do it, I think, is a lot of it comes down to.
The Sussex one, and I attended the committee in common, one of the particular points that they raised in this context was the need to have advanced or care plans in advance for patients, so all their relatives are aware of it. This is what will happen if and when this happens. This is what you will do. This is who you approach, and so on. And it seemed eminently sensible to have those plans all done in advance, so that you then take out all of this emergency.
This is the problem we've got a lot of the time. The reason we're involved is because something's gone wrong in the system. If the patient that's been properly planned and properly do this, do that, we never see. But it's the people that either haven't themselves engaged in the process, which does happen, of course, or there's just been, these other services are just so on their knees that no one is taking the time to explain it to the families. So we are working with the local partners to improve that. And your other question about why is Kent better than Surrey or Sussex, I think each area has, this is the problem we're always going to have being a 3-county ambulance service. You've got each area is doing their own things and their own projects, and no one talks to anybody else. And indeed, why should they? I suppose they are completely different counties. But all me and Jen can do is just try to keep an eye on these things, and then I think sometimes we can then say, well, Kent are doing this to Sussex. Sussex is like, perhaps we could do that. So we try, I think, is the... I don't know if Jen wants to come in on any of these questions at all.
Hello everyone, can you hear me okay?
Oh, blimey, yes.
Sorry, I'm not shouting at you. Thank you, Imogen, for presenting, and I'm sorry that I can't be there with you. I think just to come back to your first question is that we're in the very early stages of speaking with our ICB colleagues, very much in the sense of just presenting the facts, the data and the insights. I'm conscious that they'll have their own insights on our data as well, and their own steer on that as well. But the conversations that we've had early doors have been really encouraging, and they're very interested in hearing the scale of the problem that we're seeing. And I'm sure the model of care involved in
Thank you for that. I mean, and we clearly have a role. You know, we talked about integration. You know, we can see what's going on, and you're right. The more we can bring people together and learn from each other, that's really important. Margaret, I think you wanted to come in, and then Simon, if that.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to reflect into the board that we work at very different levels. So it's really, we're very fortunate to have Imogen and Jen, who do have quite a voice across the ICBs, across the systems, across providers at that level. Also keep in mind we have the divisional governance groups, and they have connections into the systems, into each of the systems at divisional basis in very many different meetings and forums, and that's where we can also influence. Of course, the ICBs themselves have set out the priorities, and as an ambulance service, we're also working across in a clinical reference group who have chosen their priorities or pathways to look at. And end of life isn't one of those priorities that have been chosen by that group, unless things have changed very recently. So there's only so much ICBs, systems, etc. can focus on at a time. And end of life hasn't come one of those, which is why the relationships, the providing the information, providing the data, getting the intelligence together, and certainly encouraging the right things. Unfortunately, end of life has been one of those areas that has been very important and critical, and all of us are touched by it for years and years and years, but still doesn't seem to have that focus and attention. So I think the most important thing, this data is so refreshing. We've not been able to present it. So Imogen, you said even yourself were surprised to see what was coming through. So providing that information at this level, and the work you and Jen are doing, is vital. But we're also influencing at many other levels. So just to talk to your point, Howard, unfortunately it hasn't become one of the either ICB's priorities nor the ambulance reference group. That doesn't mean we can't still influence and shape, but it does limit how much can be done.
Okay, I'm very conscious of time. I'm not doing very... So very quickly from Paul, and then I've got one question, please. Sorry, Nick. Sorry, yeah.
Thanks, Imogen. I just wanted to comment on the care records, because I think you made some really important points about access to DNA, CPR, end-of-life care records, and do acknowledge that very much. There are a couple of things that we're doing in the short term to help, and then one slightly medium term. So at the Shared Care Record Board last week, we approved the rollout of GP Connect across the whole trust area. GP Connect allows us to see that there is an end-of-life care record, but we can't access it through that platform, but we know there's one there. So we could ask the Emergency Operations Centre to access it for us. We are also rolling out Kent Medway Care Record across the Kent area. So as an initial pilot, we will roll it out wider, but so that we understand the processes and appropriate times of access, and make sure it's properly integrated into our care record. That will give us direct access into the end-of-life records, so that will help. In the period of time, hopefully up to the end of this financial year, to the end of March, we are also rolling out, looking to roll out the National Care Record System, which will give us slightly wider access. It's not absolutely consistent everywhere, but it should give us wider access to those records. It requires an extra level of security and authentication that takes us a bit longer to roll that out, but we are looking to do that by the end of March as well. So we are going in the right direction.
Thank you for that. I mean, that the electronic digital part of this is so important, and the ability to share it. I want to just finish on this, but I did want to ask David or Simon. So we're moving to a new commissioning model. All of this depends on resources, being able to fund. And I just wondered, and we've had reference to the quality of data that we've got. Is this too granular that isn't reflected in our commissioning going forward?
Thanks. I'll start with who wants to continue. So first of all, thank you. And thank you, I think, also for shouting at Catherine 3 times, I counted. It just shows the power of telling stories with the right data. And I think, Michael, to your point, this is an example of, I don't think it's too granular, because the impact of the story is what then helps us have the right conversation with the system around the things that we see. And in this example, it's things that slip through the net, which nobody else sees. And if we don't use that data to give that type of voice to our commissioners, then some things may be fixed in Sussex, but we'll lose opportunities to have a greater impact at a greater scale.
It's not that this is too granular, is would the commissioning amount of money that we get recognise this as a service that we are providing, and would the commissioning go into that granularity and say, we want this, and this is what we're prepared to pay for it?
So I don't think we've had a discussion, Simon. As Imogen knows very well, this is part of non-commissioned work. So, for instance, you've mentioned taking deceased people to the mortuary. That's what we'd call non-commissioned work. So it's very clearly an exclusion of our current commission contract. I think the question for this is, which is a broader philosophical question we've been grappling with for the last couple of years, what is the role that we have to play, not just as an ambulance service, but as a broader contributor to urgent and emergency care across the regions that we serve? So I think that is exactly the type of conversation we need to be having with the commissioners. Whether it's not part of our funding envelope, I think we need to get into that discussion, because one of the two things will happen. Either we will continue to be expected to be providing it and provide a sub-quality service and fail to patients, or we're going to deprive the system of the opportunity of putting something in place that works. And then we can reflect on what's our role to connect with that service, because what we've heard as well is multiple opportunities where we missed an opportunity to be able to do the best thing for patient even before we got to the patient. You've given us a great example of something that happened this morning. So I think, Michael, that is the work that we need to take forward, and clearly the fact that our commissioners are moving now to a strategic commissioning space at a Southeast region footprint gives us an opportunity to think about how we influence in that space.
Okay, thank you. And the quality of the information that you're providing, I think, puts us in a very strong position. I just want to say again, thank you for this particular aspect. I'm very much assured that, you know, we are providing an excellent service in a very sad time in life, but thank you. And that, you know, going forward, I think that, you know, we are assured of the quality of the work that we're doing, which is excellent. So thank you. I'm conscious of time. I'm not showing this very well, I'm sure. I do want to consider give equal time to the next 2 clinical models, but we were due to break at 12:05. I'm proposing to extend that to about 12:15. So I'm really sorry to colleagues here, but could I ask that both of you, 10 minutes each on each of those? That's not to in any way deflect from their importance, but it's just time management, please. So thank you.
She's a tough act to follow, I have to say. So the other model of care, and the model of care I'd like to talk to you about, is the sort of falls and frailty and older people. And obviously we've been meeting to discuss what is out there. Our current picture is we know that we serve a lot of our calls are about frailty, falls related. Often these are very sort of non-injury or low acuity kind of calls, and they often lead to long waits, which they're there for as a C3, C4 category, and we often see them with long lies. So the group has kind of been coming together to look at this problem and look at ways in which we can work on this within this sort of model of care. So I'll give you a bit of an update. I'm not going to take 10 minutes, I don't think. So the kind of update of where we're at. So the CFR manual handling training has been kind of ramped up and is very moving forward at pace. There are 9 courses booked this October. And the volunteers are being kind of encouraged to take up these courses and also to commit to a training package of kind of keeping this manual training going. The BI team have been busy because not only have they helped End of Life, but they've also produced a dashboard for the CFRs, and this is vital for us to be able to understand the information, which then will lead to Danny and the team being able to look at how do we plan these so that we don't have them all at once and none at other times, so that we can start to utilise them better. Alongside this, we've been looking at how can we use these CFRs. If we can work out when they're on, how can we use them? And so there's a paper that is going to PPG, which is an extension of one that has previously been there, which was around using our CFRs to send as a first, which to allow, firstly, if it's safe to do so, pick the patient off the floor. That solves, or helps with one of our long lie issues. And then be able to facilitate giving a telephone or putting a telephone near a patient so that we can undertake a virtual consultation. And then as we roll out video consultation, that also. The initial paper, I think, went for the APP hubs to do this sort of as their eCal, whereas actually the new paper looks at using any of our virtual clinicians now that we have managed to, not only have our EOC clinical teams, but now roll it out into our OUs and the hubs. So in the hope that actually we can start to get some more patients and also that then leads to potentially being able to use the system in order to push into, virtually put into community services, for the onward care, but also that allows us to recognise ill patients, and hopefully then be able to, kind of escalate them up very quickly. So that paper will be going. We've been looking at, alongside that, kind of the mapping of the falls and frailty services alongside with SCAS because it's vital that the services that are commissioned are used. So understanding where they are, we can then start to promote them more, to be able to use them more. The care home reduction plan that started in Paddock Woods, which was around the APPs working with the care homes to limit unnecessary calls. We were seeing a lot of calls for, can you just come and check them out? And so therefore, this has now been ramped up and is actually all areas the care homes have been contacted across Seacamps Patch and are being managed by the APP team. So this is kind of going to be very overgoing, especially over winter, to prevent those calls. And the UCR portal is now rolled out across all three counties. So that allows that first sieve of, showing the patients that we hold to the UCR teams and for them to obviously try and assist, and therefore that data is being shared with the commissioning groups in order to try and encourage them to take more. So I don't know where I am on this slide because I don't think I followed it, but that kind of gave you what the model of care is, but that was the update of where our where the working group has kind of, or some highlights of where the working group and what areas we've been working on. So
thank you. Again, a very good presentation. Before I open up, can I ask two questions? So, this is a model of care in different forms that has been growing over a number of years. How far are we away from it being a really mature, I hate to use the expression business as usual, but this is our core offering or part of our core offering? I'm probably using the wrong adjectives there, but what more is it that we need to do? Is it a resource issue? Is it training? Is it like we talked about, the joining up of information? I just wondered on a trajectory where this is, and it seems to me that we're well established to face winter, which is what we're focusing on at the moment, but I'm just interested, where would you expect this to be in a year's time, 2 years?
I mean, I think from the training side of it, obviously, bringing in key skills is around frailty. We've been looking at training for onward going around the frailty to be able to kind of recognise that sort of frail patient. from a point of view of, you know, business as usual, when actually there are commissioned services out there that are commissioned to deal with this kind of workload, and that's really the sort of long range would be around making sure that we can access those services and the patients can access those services would be, from my understanding of that. I don't know if Richard's got any more.
Richard, yes, please.
Yeah, just to add to what Vicky was saying, although I agree with you, we've been talking about it for a number of years, I don't think the ambulance sector has properly tackled it until now. And it's only this year that AACE have released a comprehensive falls management framework for ambulance services. So it's a priority for AACE, it's a priority for us this year. And we're just starting to make traction. In terms of trajectory, to me, the most important thing is we need to stop people laying on the floor for long periods of time. That's our overriding priority. And at the moment, they lay on the floor too long, they decondition, and then we end up having to take them to hospital because they become more poorly from laying on the floor. And so we're not the sole solution to that. As Vicky said, there's lots of services out there that are commissioned to manage people that fall over. We've just got to interconnect with those services and make sure we utilise them properly, the public know about them, and that we provide a service when we do get called to get there quickly and get them up off the floor. And volunteers is a key strand of that strategy, because the volunteers in their local communities can get them off the floor, call us, check it's okay to leave them, and then leave the scene, and that patient's fine. So it's a multi-pronged attack, but I think we're just in the start of that process rather than anywhere near the end.
And my final question, to what extent is the real public awareness of this? Because what you've articulating there seems to be a very sensible, and I hate to use the word, but resources are constrained, cost-effective approach with sustainable outcomes. But a lot, it does depend on, you know, the people who phone us understanding what our model is. Because when you talk to colleagues and, you know, friends who experience it, the immediate response is, well, we want an ambulance here and we want it now. And having to make an understanding that there are choices that we have to make. So I wondered around about the public awareness, because what you're offering is a very safe, in my view, response, but it's not always perceived as in that way.
So I think the public awareness of the other services available for people who fall over is very, very low. And I don't think that's surprising, and I'm not sure we'll ever change it, because if any of us found someone laying on the floor, our natural instinct is, oh my goodness, they might be hurt, let's dial 999. I think what we've got to do is adapt what the response is when people call 999. It isn't always send a blue light ambulance to sort it out. It could be, okay, do you think they're hurt? If they're not hurt, it could be that the community falls team could come and pick them up. It could be that a volunteer comes to pick them up. It doesn't necessarily need a 999 paramedic response. But I'm not sure we'll change public perception of that, because any of us in that situation are probably would dial 999, and we all know what services are available. So,
and please, I'm not, and I will shut up on this one. It is that recognition that when they phone 99, which is a legitimate thing, the response that they get may not be what they immediately expect, and they need to have confidence that response is as good as just sending it, you know, an ambulance. But I think we're on the same page, and I get the assurance that you're talking about. May I open it to questions, please? Any? Liz, you were confident by what you saw here.
Yeah, I think actually for the first time we have a clear plan and a model of care, and I think it is that response to the call from our EOC colleagues and how we react to that. But I think it's also identified the volume of activity fallers within our communities and the time taken to respond to that, and that's only ever going to increase with our ageing population as well. So I think this model of care, in terms of the volume of calls and the volume of responses, is key to how we are going to work going forward and do that conveyance avoidance into A&E as well. So thank you for all the work on this.
Okay, that's really excellent. Simon, did you want to come in, Vic?
Thanks. I mean, I'll thank you in advance, Dan, but thank you for some great presentations. Just to say, firstly, in response to some of the comments, we had Susanna presentation on this 6 months ago. We're bringing it back now. We will bring it back again in another 6 months. So the commitment is to keep this story going because it's integral to making a difference to people's care. The second point I wanted to make is, and it's kind of come up, your point, Howard, ambulance services are commissioned, in my view, in a fairly reductive way. Time-bound standards are de minimis. They shouldn't be what we should aspire to. And I think we've got an opportunity with a strategic commissioner coming online to start to say, we think you should commission us in this way or that way. And David made that point very clearly, and I certainly will be taking up cudgels in my conversations on that behalf, because otherwise we will simply get a reiteration of what we've always had, right? Just hit the response standards. But when you think about C2 or C3, or indeed any of our categories of call, there's a huge bucket of clinical conditions in there, and we need to get better at giving a more differentiated and more individualised response. That indeed is what the 10-year plan says. Thirdly, I think these presentations are so good. I was talking earlier on about the fact that I am sitting on the neighbourhood health group nationally. I'm going to share this presentation with them to help inform their thinking about the national direction of travel that we should be taking, because what's true here is for sure true wider than just CCAM. These are national issues that neighbourhood health should grapple with if we're going to be believable in this space.
Thank you, Simon. Dan, can we hand over to you, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll do my best with 4 minutes. So on to reversible cardiac arrest, and we're hearing, I suppose, quite a breadth of our models of care today, even with the 3 focus areas. So reversible cardiac arrest, we're at the, I suppose, the top end of the triangle. It often gets described as the apex event, the one that actually is truly time critical, the one that everyone, I think, would agree that the ambulance service exists for. But also reminds me of some of the core interdependencies, so including with the ones that we've heard, which you might not necessarily naturally bring together. But there's a lot of overlap between the end-of-life team and resuscitation, because resuscitation is about also resuscitating the right people. Good survival comes from good decisions about who to resuscitate, and also with that then comes dignity in death when it's appropriate, and also with falls, frailty, a huge caseload that absorbs a huge amount of our resource appropriately. But again, unless we get that bit right, there isn't a resource to make the timely response. So all of this is independent, and none can be done in isolation. So just pause as my screen goes blank and my notes disappear, but pause for just to reflect on why we are here and why we are talking about reversible cardiac arrest. And these are 3 examples, 3 survivors of the 307 in the last calendar year or financial year that we saw. And this is ultimately why we're doing this. This is why we talk about it being reversible and not just a means to an end. These are all people returning to their families, loved ones, friends, and continuing with lives that were almost tragically cut short if it hadn't have been for the interventions of bystanders, now crews. And then just focusing back and reminding us the things that do make a difference. So when we look at survival, there are things that stand out. Response time is one of them, and I know we've just spoken, and I would agree with Simon around that response time targets aren't, they're blunt instruments. This is probably the only example where true time criticality is a factor, where actually the time we take to get there, and particularly get hands on the chest, and particularly put a defibrillator on the patient, does make a difference. And with each moment that goes by, the opportunity for survival diminishes. And the same way with defibrillation, but ultimately it comes back to time. It's time to that first shot being delivered. Now that doesn't have to be by us, that doesn't have to be by an ambulance arriving. There's an opportunity to do that before we arrive that we need to take advantage of. And that's where we come into a big focus of the reversible cardiac arrest model, is around improving the use and access to public defibrillators, currently used in less than 10% of cardiac arrests. Now, some of that is reflective of where cardiac arrests happen. Majority of cardiac arrests, over nearly 3/4, happen in the home, or we haven't all got defibrillators in our house. But for the ones that happen in public places, we're still not seeing them utilised as often as they should be. But also, whilst we're not all going to have one in our house, have we all got one in our communities, in our neighbourhoods, on the corner? And the answer is no, and that's something that we need to address as we go forward. And it links into health inequalities, which is obviously topical this year as part of our quality account and other areas of focus. But it hits in resuscitation as well, and I've spoken about this before. But there's two elements that one, we know now from our rich data in our cardiac arrest registry that incidence of cardiac arrest aligns with incidence of higher deprivation, because in areas of higher deprivation there's inequality in how people access healthcare, comorbidities that increase or go unrecognised, illnesses that go unrecognised, and access to healthcare which is different, which then increases the incidence of cardiac arrest and poorer outcomes for those cohorts of patients. And then also, and I've spoken about this before, where are our CFRs? Valuable volunteer resource. We can't do this without them, but where are they coming from? Well, they're typically coming from the more affluent villages, the communities that mobilise themselves to support local people, but actually not within the deprived towns and bigger populated areas. And likewise, public access defibrillators, where are they? That's where the money is typically. It's where the golf club is. It's where the people raise the money in the village, not in the populated, densely urban areas where actually the incidence of cardiac arrest is occurring. And why? Because all of this is not public funded. Public access defibrillators are actually all privately or charitably funded. And the work we need to do is around identifying where they need to be and championing our communities to be more resilient. And so all the things we do start to look at how we can influence the chain of survival, but particularly around mobilising the communities to help themselves, provide early CPR before we arrive, provide early fibrillation before we arrive. But if it can't happen before we arrive for any reason, then our timely response obviously addresses that. And then when we are there, clearly, hopefully, we get a good outcome and we can start to influence the next phase of care and reduction of further harm. So what's new and what are the things we're doing? So relaunch of Good Sam to coincide with Restart Heart Day. So Good Sam, very quickly, is it's almost a crowd sourcing app that's linked to our CAD system, and when there's a cardiac arrest, it alerts people on the system, and they can respond within the local communities or wherever they happen to be. We've had some IT challenges with our CAD integration. They're being worked through now, and so a relaunch with Restart Heart Day to build the numbers and build this really valuable resource. Pilot of CPR feedback. So that's complete in one area, really successful, and actually saw better results than we could have expected as well. We knew it would hopefully do something, but actually by providing feedback to crews on their resuscitation efforts and providing some learning, both positive reinforcement and areas for learning, we saw a real-time reduction in the next set of audits around performance. We've talked about CFRs and the importance of CFRs, and I keep saying this within the cardiac arrest work stream, is we can't do this now without mobilising the community to help us. We've made some really good inroads and really should be really pleased of our cardiac arrest survival rates, but to make now the next big jump, it's got to be around influencing the early phases of care, which we can't do on our own. And it's aligned now with the volunteer strategy which the Community Resilience team are putting together, and how we and the new Community Resuscitation Officer posts that have been funded by NHS charities together, and with that work stream hopefully mobilising our communities, engaging them, educating them, and increasing our rates of bystander CPR and public access to defibrillator usage. Just talked about those. And then the last thing to leave us on is, again, I suppose it's aligned to the first slide. The reason we're doing this is to get survival. Now, survival from out-hospital cardiac arrest is never going to be 100%, and we shouldn't be aiming for that because it's unrealistic. But if we look at societies that have nailed this, Norway is a good example, where it's a whole societal responsibility around saving people and also having good deaths, so making good decisions, making sure that planning's done, but also then when you do collapse, people know CPR because they've learned it at school. There are public access defibrillators everywhere, and people just get on with it. and survival rates then sort of double what we're seeing here in the UK. But these are, you know, some of, if not the highest, survival rates within the UK at the moment. So we should be really proud with our progress. And we are up on our target of this year, which is 12.5% by end of year, and we're already looking at 13.4 year to date. But like I say, to really now start chipping away, what I'm expecting is that to plateau unless we can really get into the communities to help us. Thank you, Chair.
Dan, thank you very much. Brilliant presentation again, and thank you for the speed with which you did that. May I, I've got one question at the end, but could I open this up to questions, please? Or, please.
Thanks, Michael,
Suzanne.
and thanks, Rod. Thanks to the team. I found those presentations fascinating when I was reading them in preparation for today. I particularly appreciate your acknowledgement of the communities and the social deprivation, or the deprivation that are communities that is then compounded just purely through an accident of birth. I find that quite shocking. So I'm really glad that you highlighted that in your presentation. I suppose it's a question really I'm directing to Simon, perhaps, around the divisional structure, and will that help us get into our communities such that we can actively work to redress these health inequalities, which really is shocking in given how affluent we are as a society generally. So Simon, I'd love to hear what the divisions are doing.
Well, I'm sure Jen, who's leading this work, would want to comment too.
Thank you.
But the short answer to your question is yes, because while there are some things we need to do once across CCAM, for CCAM, digital is a good example. You wouldn't want 3 different versions of digital systems. And indeed, just to come back, one of the things that I hope that the new structure will give us, with Surrey and Sussex coming together and Kent being one, is a much more integrated approach to some of these, and we should be absolutely pushing that. But digital is a good example of what's across CCAM. But the map that Dan put up, great, thanks for the update, Dan, again, shows that we need to be much more individualised. And I say again, the 10-year plan expects us to work out what that individuation looks like and respond to it meaningfully. And Margaret and I were talking about this recently, about how do we make health inequalities real in terms of our service delivery model. Well, that map, if that map isn't a good enough challenge to respond to, I don't know what is. And as these structures mature, I would be expecting people to want to say we need to do more in area X of this, and not just do a vanilla approach across CCAM, just reflecting maybe that was what we would have done in the past. So I think it was in Sussex, wasn't it, Dan, that the area of access to public defibrillators was pretty challenged. Brighton, was it? I just was doing a quick...
So Medway Town's one of our biggest challenges.
Medway Town. So there we are, Medway Town. So perhaps when we come back, the challenge that we should set ourselves in this space in 6 months' time is where do we start from in terms of public access defibrillators in Medway, and how many have we managed to put in as a consequence of what we've just discussed today?
And I think for me, so I'd very much welcome that, and so pleased it was highlighted. And I think there's also perhaps something here for our charity to occupy in that space,
so, I mean,
and
I
really
did,
harness and utilise that.
I did draw that out, but you know, but I'll say again here, the charity's missions. We talked about education in schools. I think you alluded to it, Dan. In Norway, they teach CPR in schools. We do not do that routinely anymore. Making public access defibrillators available, that's the second mission of our charity. Building resilience in our staff and supporting our CFRs is the third mission of our charity. And that then allows us to try and attract volunteers. And Dan alluded to it again, but I'll just again emphasise it here. Our community resuscitation office is not, that should be targeted. So that's my thoughts. If you wanted to add anything, Jen.
Yeah, just briefly, Suzanne. So certainly, I think the divisional framework is our sort of delivery vehicle for localising our response to inequalities and obviously a number of other areas. For example, just to give a couple of specifics, there are things where we need to have a trust-wide strategy, but that is tailored to areas. So the new upcoming volunteering and community resilience strategy has got a really explicit objective to look at the areas where we have deficits, as Dan has touched on, in volunteer numbers, in public access defibrillators, in education for communities, and specifically focus on increasing engagement and resilience in those areas. So that is a trust-wide strategy, but which will be tailored, and the delivery of that will be interlinked with the divisional structure, because we'll be utilising a hub and spoke structure for our community resilience offering in the future. And then with the divisional directors as well, and I'm grateful for the support that non-exec colleagues are offering to the directors, what we're embedding in, we can't do everything, so we need to have a more tailored approach to the priorities of each county and division, which will naturally be different for our integrated care call centre operations than it perhaps will be in Surrey, Sussex or Kent. So in Kent, we are specifically looking at what are the top health inequality areas and what can we select for the coming winter and into next year as a health inequalities priority that would be deliverable for us as a making every contact count partner in Kent. So that will look at what are the areas with the greatest inequalities, and is it that we can make a meaningful intervention in diabetes prevalence, for example. Whereas I think we might want to look at it differently. Perhaps in Surrey and Sussex, maybe we've got a priority through the quality account around mental health, so we might want to look at that in Surrey and Sussex. So I think we're setting those objectives explicitly as part of the divisional framework, and we really need to help the divisions through the directors, their leadership teams and the OUs to think about how to deliver that within the remit of our core business. So I think it's a really interesting challenge, but it's one that we are trying to embed in our structure.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks, Mike.
Peter, very quickly, because I'm conscious.
Just very quick. Coming back to the funding of defibrillators, have we considered actually, as part of our charity work, sort of tapping retailers, food retailers or something like that for funding, and actually having these machines there? Because most towns have got a Tesco's or Sainsbury's, and they are quite well off, aren't they? So they support scout groups and things. So is that an opportunity for us?
Yes, and I think Tesco's reported their profits this very morning, didn't they, for those who are listening to the news? So yeah, that is the reason for having Vicky, isn't it? Because Vicky is able to form those connections and relationships with those local communities. What we do know, Peter, is that people love to be able to put their name on something, and defibrillators is one of those things that gives people a sense of doing tangible good. And I know from my own experience of going to the Crowborough CFRs, they are hugely successful in raising money for exactly that issue, for exactly that focus. So yes is the short answer.
Thanks, Peter. That's a very good question. Can I ask one final question? So your point about community first responders, I think, is really, really well made. And I'm always conscious that while we have significant areas of inequality within our patch, we don't have the big urban conurbation that Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, which face this problem. Inner city communities feeling often ostracised, not supported. And I just wondered, not for now, are we tapping in enough through ACE and others, through their experience and are they any better at getting community first responders from those communities? It's a genuine open question, and no criticism is implied.
It's a fair question. I think so. There's been an enormous piece of work done by AACE last year and published around healthcare inequalities in cardiac arrest that looks at the whole nation and then obviously is representative of those particularly metropolitan and urban centres and the different challenges that they face. And I think we just face it on a not more focused, but smaller, but no less profound perspective in terms of our urban areas. And I think you find that it's not just urban areas. We've actually, one of the challenges we also have that those areas don't have is then the poverty and deprivation in rural areas, which is then also brings its own particular challenges. But I think they are more concentrated and pronounced in our urban areas. And I come back to the Medway towns being a good example of an area, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if we looked at other models of care and overlaid it with deprivation, that we wouldn't see similar themes and trends and incidents, mental health, for example, and other things.
Question is, sorry to put you on, but do we know? Have we done that work?
I don't think we have for every model of care. We certainly know it in the cardiac arrest model of care, because it's only data we're starting to understand and get hold of in terms of the deprivation mapping. But all of these things, what causes cardiac arrest? Well, it's generally poorer quality of life, poorer healthcare, poorer access to healthcare, poorer education, poorer food source, etc. etc. And that is linked to most things that we do. But no, I think it's something that we need to understand through our community resilience strategy, and I know Danny and team are on it in terms of, you don't want to turn down volunteers, and that's what we've not done. And so, but we just end up with them in the wrong place. And now it's about how we use willing volunteers, maybe in other places, or how we use their enthusiasm to say, well, how do we get the same out of other areas?
Okay, thank you. Richard, thank you as Executive Lead for coordinating this response. I think it gives us significant assurance that we are really being proactive in terms of the communities that we serve, particularly as we go through the difficult period of winter. So thank you for that. I'm conscious of time. We are due to finish this board at 1:15. I think realistically it's going to be 1:30. So we've got 10-minute break and then 50 minutes to continue and finalise the final set of business. Thank you very much. Okay, can we resume, please? Thank you. Oh, no, winter plan.
Winter plan.
Yeah, okay, and that's Jen. Yeah, thank you. Hello, thank you for everybody coming back. We have 50, less than 50, is it? I don't know, 50 minutes. So, Jen, you're going to introduce the winter plan, please.
Thanks, Michael. I'll take the winter plan document as read and just make a few kind of overall remarks. So winter planning this year has been a refreshed process, and it has been good to note that it has actually been probably both regionally and nationally and in the Trust, I hope, a simplified and better focused process this year. So nationally, we have been issued with an assurance template, which is what the board is presented with today to endorse. And that was accompanied by a sort of checklist of areas to consider for winter planning, which was a sensible approach, which we were pleased to participate in, and has perhaps reduced some of the kind of overhead of the process that we might have experienced in previous years. So that was positive. The other kind of regional element to it was a winter planning check and challenge resilience tabletop session, which we participated in the early part of September with the South East region, which was a useful opportunity to network and to compare and contrast and consider some of the areas that we all faced during winter, although perhaps didn't lead to any new learning, but perhaps that wasn't the purpose of it. So it was a good opportunity to feel supported and to make some of those relationships, which are so important, that we collaborate together to support each other during winter as an NHS system. So we have participated fully in that process. Within the organisation, we've developed our winter plan very much in line with our broader resilience framework. Rather than seeing this as a separate one-off activity where we write a plan and then we put it in the cupboard, come back to it next year, we have tried to make this a live document that's part of our divisional resilience framework, which we've implemented, and that means we're having a regular focus on resilience through all of the divisions, both those cost-cutting EOC divisions and also the 3 counties. And in that focus, we think strategically about how we improve our resilience longer terms through becoming more productive. Also, tactically, how do we look forward and see what's coming up? It's not a surprise that there are bank holidays over the Christmas and New Year period, for example. And we also think, what do we need to do to oversee and respond to pressures on a day-to-day basis? And those are all areas that we're trying to improve our practice in throughout the year, and in particular for winter. Clearly, there are some things we do specially for winter. We have very strong focus on vaccination, strong focus on staff wellbeing and support, because without our workforce, clearly we're not going to be as well placed to look after patients. We have a big focus on system collaboration and support, hospital handovers, participation and information sharing with our system partners, and utilising alternative pathways where we can. And we have a strong focus on our own internal oversight and demand management and resource productivity, I suppose you might put it down as. So we're doing everything we can to deliver additional productivity, additional resources, and to think about how we respond mindfully through the use of demand management and clinical assessment to the pressures that we will experience. So that's our kind of overall approach. We have in the document shown how we've considered all of the checklist items and indeed more. Clearly, we're not suggesting that we've got everything perfectly lined up and there'll be no challenges, which is the point of this being a live document, and we will have a monthly review cycle for winter planning, again, as part of our broader resilience framework within operations, ably supported by our broader clinical and corporate colleagues. So that is the document and the framework. Very happy to take any questions or clarify any points that would be helpful.
Hey, Jen, thank you very much. And I'm very clear that this has gone through the executive team and has the support of the executive team. This is a board responsibility. We need to be confident, and while you cannot be absolutely assured, we need to be confident that we're doing all that we can to prepare adequately. So I'm going to put the NEDs on the spot. I'm going to go around every NED and ask them their view on whether they support this document, anything that they, that causes them concern. I didn't give anybody any. I know you've reviewed it at Finance Committee, and I'll come to you first, but I do want all of the NEDs. I'm conscious everybody's got to earn their money, so I'm going to get everybody thinking about this. So, over to you, Sina.
Thank you, Michael. That is the point I wanted to make, that it had come through Finance and Investment Committee, where we gave it a detailed scrutiny and challenge. And very grateful to Jen and colleagues for responding to that. There was a particular focus, I think, on prevention and pathways, response and collaboration across the system. We appreciate that that collaborative piece is really very important. And as Jen has outlined, we're doing the work. We're going to the right meetings. We are contributing. So it's certainly, with regard to the decision, certainly our committee recommended it to the board, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I should have come to you first, but I do want, this is so critical going forward. I just want each NED to have an opportunity, whether what they've heard, whether they've got concerns or anything, where they're looking for more information. So, Howard, can I go to you first?
Thank you. Yes, no, it's overall, I think the best winter plan I've seen so far, and also in good time, which is great, before winter. So the only residual concern I have in my heart is our undertaking of the Nexus refurbishment right at the start of winter, and that worries me. I know there's a lot of work being done to prepare for it, but that, for me, remains a residual risk that I have some concerns over. But I accept that we are proceeding ahead, but I'm just aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Can you just hold? Make a list. Sorry, thank you very much. Well organised. Well done, your Chief Operator. Max, any concerns from your perspective?
No, just to thank colleagues for the comprehensive paper that underpins it, and also the collaboration with all the wide-ranging agencies. The only reflection I would offer is actually from the Shadow Board meeting, which was, again, the team went through it with forensic detail. And I think there was one element in particular where we just need to be cautious in the communication of it. I don't know how widely as a document it plans to be accessible to colleagues, but I think there was one item on the checklist, so not an intent necessarily from CCAM, but the NHSE template around cancellation of annual leave. And one of the Shadow Board did mention, does that mean that that's a very real possibility? And I think just making sure that the right reassurance is given on topics that might cause concern or consternation.
Thank you. That's a very good point. Peter, anything from your audit brain?
It's my first winter plan. I'm new to the to this, and I was actually quite impressed. I come from an environment where we are reactive and not forward-looking at all. So, no, I can't add anything to that. Thank you.
No, that's still valuable. Liz, from the quality, are you happy with it?
So just so we did have some concerns. I was lucky to have a call with Jen and Lucas to go through the plan, and my concerns were around our integrated care, hear and treat, and outcomes for patients. We know it's been a challenge to hit our hear and treat target, and that is ramping up during the winter months. It is still a challenge, but I did gain assurance from Jen and Lucas that we have adequate resilience within the plan to manage if we don't hit that percentage of hear and treat target, that we would have enough people, enough fleet to be able to respond in other areas. So I support the winter plan.
Okay, that's a good comment. Paul, anything from digital perspective?
Yeah, so we went through it in the Resilience Forum as well, and it's the most comprehensive plan we've ever seen, I think. It's excellent. The only concern I had was about how do you actually, there's so much in it and there's so many findings, how do you get people on the ground to actually understand it all? And so it makes a difference, but very good work.
Okay. Sabu, anything from you?
I had just a couple of questions. I agree with Liz on the hear and treat, which occurred to me, but just on the vaccinations, so you included COVID and influenza. Last year we had a rise of RSV as well, so is that included in the vaccination group? And just on hospital handovers, because you've mentioned that, are we sharing this plan and talking to our partners, A&E departments? That'd be useful to know.
Thank you. Really good points, actually. And then Mojcan, please.
Thank you very much. My question was around prevention vaccination. What target are we aiming for this year? I understand the NHSE paper is asking for at least 5% increased compliance. Apologies if I've missed it a bit in there. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've got your list there, Jen.
I have got my list there. Yeah, sorry. I am just looking to. I think the target for vaccination is in the plan, but I might get Margaret to talk. Do you want to do that, Margaret?
So, thank you very much. So regarding vaccinations, it will only be the influenza vaccination. COVID, as we know, is for vulnerable and over 75s. There is absolutely no plan nationally to bring it to any other staff group or any group of people. Regarding the target, we've all been given a stretch target of an extra 5% of where we were. So this is the trouble when you're top of class. So we were at 73.6%, so this year will be 78.6%. We are very mindful of the Nexus refurbishment, which will mean catching the EOC 11s a little bit more difficult, a bit trickier, and they were the lowest percentage last year, but we have plans in place for that. And we already have all the teams and the champions up and ready to go. Launch is the 6th of October.
Thank you, Margaret. Very good. Any other points?
Yeah, sorry. I'll respond to the question. So yeah, thank you, Margaret. And it is in the plan between 75 and 80%, and that's exactly what the flu vaccination plan states. And as Margaret confirmed, it is flu, not COVID. We don't have a plan to offer RSV vaccination, but an area that has come out of more recent discussions in the last week or so around the learnings between trusts through the region about winter planning is that we might need to have a focus on how we respond to a possible PEDS RSV outbreak. So that's on my list of things to discuss with the team at the first review of the plan, and I think is a good illustration of how it's a live document. So although we may not always be the primary responders around PEDS RSV, it has a big impact on us in terms of particularly things like our 111 service. So we won't necessarily going to spend all our time updating the document every single day of the week, but we will be planning for PEDS RSV, for example. I'd just picking up a couple of other points. The plan is comprehensive, but clearly not every part of it applies to every operating unit or team, and so the divisions will cascade it appropriately with their clinical colleagues to the people who need to know. So I think that is in hand, and hopefully won't confuse people. In terms of the plan itself's publication, the point Max made, the question of cancelling annual leave, as you rightly said, is one of the lines of inquiry from NHSE. Our resource escalation action plan framework, REAP protocol, already includes the consideration of measures such as cancellation of annual leave at the highest levels of escalation. And this is a conversation that we need to strike the right balance between being so terrified of mentioning it that we don't say what's already in our protocol. And clearly we're not in the business of setting hares running. That's not something we're proposing to do. We're not proposing to take any extra actions around it. But were we to reach REAP 4, which actually last winter we didn't move into REAP 4, then it would be incumbent upon us to consider that as a possible action. I don't think it's likely, and we certainly won't be publishing the plan or putting that forward as an action. So, but I think it's a good point about that balance of needing to have a conversation about what actions you might take in extremis. And that actually came out at the NHSE planning day, the winter plan tabletop exercise. I was just going to mention Hear and Treat. Actually, Liz mentioned it before. I was going to follow up with it at the end, because our winter plan, I think, is resilient to protect our patients and to deliver our services over the winter. In effect, as long as we maintain the Hear and Treat rate that we're delivering at the moment, what we have to do to hit our performance plan, which requires a significant increase in or improvement in our C2 mean performance, is increase that Hear and Treat rate. And of course, that would be very helpful for our patients to get them the right care and to support winter response. So I suppose when we discussed it, Liz, it's effectively we can be safe and resilient over winter as long as we maintain Hear and Treat, which we have done for many months, and there's no reason to suppose we wouldn't. But if we can increase it in line with our performance plan, that will be a real upside case, and of course it will be a necessity for us to meet our performance obligations. And so we're in a very proactive discussion amongst the executive team and through senior leadership as to how we can best support that shift in our Hear and Treat rate through improved clinical practice and productivity, through better management support, training, education, all of those mechanisms. And I'm really grateful for people's participation in that plan, and I think that we will be able to make progress in that area. Finally, on Nexus House, I mean, there are always risks, Howard, isn't it? And I agree, it doesn't affect any services really apart from the 1s and 9s call centre this side. And they're very good at contingency planning in that service. So we have worked with them, and I think they feel, we have a robust plan in place. But yeah, noted, as are other risks pertaining to different divisions. So it's a fair point.
Thanks, Jen. That's very impressive. And of course, going forward, we will monitor our performance over the winter period to be absolutely confident that we're doing our best to serve our communities. But I'm very much assured, and thank you very much for the work that's been done and for the good questions from my NED colleagues. All right, thank you very much. Can we move on then to the next item, which I think is over to you, Suzanne, for your finance report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael. This was my first Finance and Investment Committee, so before I go into the report, just to say how impressed I was with the quality of the papers and with the discussion around the table, and I can see my fellow Neds are nodding in agreement. It was a relatively weighty agenda with some quite weighty matters to discuss, but we moved through them with speed, and I was just really wanted to reflect back just how very well prepared people were and how rich the discussion was around those items. When it comes to the report, the alert piece of it, no surprise, the winter plan, which Jen has just fielded those additional questions. When we get into Assure, the financial performance, at the risk of stating the obvious, we do not underestimate the scale of the challenge, not at all. There's a tremendous SIP ask from our colleagues across the organisation, but I am assured that we know where we are going, and we've got as robust a roadmap to achieve that as really is practical. So that's really all I want to say about that. Procurement, I've real optimism for what the professionalisation of the team can deliver for the organisation, and there's evidence of that already. The estates, again, key strategic importance in achieving our ambitions, particularly around being a sustainable partner in terms of an integrated NHS. And I look forward to seeing how that evolves, and I know there is work underway in the background where we're going to deliver that at pace. The digital piece we already heard from Nick, a key enabler to develop sustainable and quality, high quality patient care. And again, you know, multifaceted, multi-streams of work to be achieved around that, not just in terms of the infrastructure. We cannot ignore that. But again, just to come back to the cyber risk, it cannot be understated. It really just cannot be understated. And also, irrespective of the work that the team and the organisation are putting into the infrastructure, we need to be very aware that many of these attacks, how they succeed is through us, you know, and maybe our laxity and our lack of training. And I appreciate very much the work that is happening there to make sure that this stays on everyone's radar, because irrespective of how good your cyber defences are, if somebody does open that email they should not have done and does respond to any, you know, there are teams of people working on this, you know, they make their living out of it. And that one about the nursery is particularly interesting. Anyone who was listening this morning, you know, it's on the deep dark net. And now they're, you know, the people who hacked are now withdrawing from the ransom demand because it's so unpopular. But anyway, we could, and I'm just very grateful for the weight and the scrutiny that's been given, not just at finance, but across our committees, because it's just so important, as we know. And then finally, if I may, just circle back to our strategic aims. And there is, as ever, a tension, isn't there? You know, delivering high quality patient care. Our people are happy. We want our people to enjoy working at CCAM. And yet we absolutely must be a sustainable partner in the NHS. And it's a big ask, not just for now, but for the generations that are coming. You know, that's who we serve, not just the people in front of us. And I would like to take a moment just to commend Simon and the team for the communications that I've seen to staff around these challenges. There was a bulletin that went out in August, I think it was, and I just thought it was so very well positioning that it is all of our business. The finances are all of our business, but there was a line in it that really struck home to me. Every decision we make about how we spend time, money and effort has a direct impact on patient care. And it is only right that we do all we can to ensure those resources are used where they are needed most. And I thought that was just very apt, particularly encapsulating what we're trying to achieve in these challenging times. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Suzanne. Really good words, and I take a lot of assurance from your report. Can I ask Simon any comments you want to make on finance position?
Just two things to mention. Can't take credit for the communication. That would have been Janine, and I think Liz wrote that one. So credit to Liz. And I know Suzanne, you've already thanked Liz for that. But I think positioning the finance is really important, and I think in the context it's a useful reminder in the context of the discussion this morning. The only other thing to mention is the change in the performance regime from NHS England sees the regional office now paying much more attention to our finance position on a monthly basis. So that will now start to take form. First off the bat will be at month 6, so as we speak, they will want to understand in a good amount of detail how we get from our forecast or our year-to-date position now, which will be a deficit, to plan break even at the end of the year, and they'll want to road test that. So useful that we did that at Finance Committee last week. So yeah, that's all.
Okay, and then I'll come in with one question, but please, Nick, I got your name right this time.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, just to add, one of the conversations we had under digital was the key performance indicators and how we will measure it going forwards. and there was a proposal of 2 indicators for our board assurance framework and a basket of up to 13 indicators we identified. I don't think it'd be that many that Finance and Investment Committee could monitor. And I think, Suzanne, we've agreed a follow-up meeting to Vic between yourself, Paul and myself to just agree on the distribution of those measures across the BAF and across Vic, and making sure that we have a way of continuously monitoring improvement. So just to mention that.
Thank you. May I ask, building on what all of you said, two questions. So part of the financial deal that we've got for this year is achievement of the C2 mean, or in excess of that, and we get that additional 10 million. There was an issue around the C2 mean about how that was clearly defined. Was there something about it? Because earlier in the year, it was we weren't meeting it. I know you've gone back to the region because there's something around the way in which, reading the papers, that's been resolved. Is that, and are we confident then that we'll meet that level of performance? Because it's a jigsaw, isn't it? That our financial position depends on our. So I just wanted a bit more assurance on that.
Short answer, at this point, as we sit here, we are as confident as we can be, and certainly in terms of our forecast position for finance, it's in there. I'm not assessing it as having any particular risk. The conversations we've had with the national team, they can see that everything we can have done, we have done. The original plan of 25 minutes C2 was contingent upon 2 minutes of improvement in UEC acceptance rates in the community. That hasn't happened for all sorts of reasons, but that's accepted by the national team. C2 segmentation also had an impact, and again, the national team has modelled and can see the work we've done to understand that. So, of our revised target, which is 28 minutes and 10 seconds, I think, we are ahead of that, so confident we'll deliver that. So no reason for us to be thinking there's a risk to that money.
Okay. And then my final one, really building, and then I'll come into it. I just wanted one question to Nick again. You talk about the digital. We've got a digital strategy. I know money is scarce. Have we got a funding gap there in terms of what our aspiration is around our digital strategy, or is that contingent on future money?
So, I think that I'm very confident the Trust has been very supportive of our endeavours here, sees digital as a priority, and we have allocated a good proportion of capital funding to support this.
Yeah.
The process we're currently going through of submitting and approving the business cases that is a result of the work programme that came to the 7th of August board will define both our investment and our expected benefits that come back from it. And it's a work in progress in fairness. It's a process we are going through, particularly through October for some of the larger financial investment areas. And Simon may like to comment, there is always a juggling act between how much we do in the different areas of work and until it's fully defined for the exact costs. So the work programme agreed that the outcome of the work programme is to put the detail into exactly the costs and the market values of things in order to deliver it. And at that point, we will understand whether there is any tension on the capital budget to support it. I think at the moment we're in a good place to proceed and make the right decisions.
I'll leave it for you two. You've given me the level of assurance, but Simon, unless you wanted to say anything.
No, just to acknowledge that Nick and the team have done a fantastic job to accelerate from when Nick joined, which was April, to the point where we've got a sort of fully fledged digital strategy signed off by the board and capital plans coming on stream to make steps to get that in place. So quite a lot of work being done.
And forgive me, I know the Finance Committee will have looked at this in detail. It's just that because it's so strategically prominent. But Did you want to say anything, Susan?
No, not at all, Michael. Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of an existential crisis, really, when it comes to what we do and what we, how we look after our patients and our people at CCAM. So I welcome the additional interest.
Thank you. Can I ask Sibu, and then I'll let you come in if you don't. Sibu.
Thank you, Chair. You may have covered this, but I noticed it in the last board about our efficiencies. So you say in the paper that we have achieved 15% of our efficiencies, but we are needing to 85% still. We're halfway through the year. And I noticed that there's an overspend in operations. EOC has recruited more people, presumably to offset a high attrition rate, and there's some other areas where some work hasn't been done, which has resulted in an overspend. So I'm just trying to understand, you're predicting we will still be at break-even position, but are we where we need to be on efficiencies? If we're halfway through the year, we've only done 15%, we have another 85% to go. Are we confident we are going to achieve that 85%? Because we've planned that most of them will happen in the second half of the year.
So the plan was always skewed towards the back end of the year. That's fairly typical for NHS organisations this year. So we're not unusual in that sense. We have a fairly robust and exec-led quarterly review process. So at quarter one, we knew we weren't where we wanted to be. The senior team responded to that with the identification of an additional £2.8 million of non-recurrent cost improvements to address the fact that we were probably not where we wanted to be. Those have all been actioned and are in hand. Additionally, there'll be other things we can do in the second half of the year, but there's nothing that I'm seeing that would put the plan at risk at this point.
And then final, Simon.
I'll pick up 2 points. Firstly, the point on the digital, and then come back to the SIPs, because I think there's a strategic element to that as well as an in-year element. So on the digital, I think just to name it, the expectation would be we're not just investing in this organisation and doing, as we have done in the ambulance sector in the past, 10 different versions of the truth, done slightly differently. There will be an expectation that we develop solutions collaboratively across the collaboration, and that is our intent. We have an upcoming SAS board meeting which will be considering business cases in the digital space where we would jointly invest in the same things rather than procure all of those things separately. That is not to say that we will not make the necessary investments locally. It's just that we're going to have to watch the interface between that which we do locally and that which we do once across the piece, and that would be the national expectation. It's a really good question on the SIPs. We are heading into a planning round with a different exam question to the one that we've ever had before, which is how do we become sustainable? By sustainable, we eliminate our carry forward deficit, which we expect to be somewhere around the £9 million mark at the end of the year. That was a known quantum that we anticipated. But when we come back and sign off the plan in December, the expectation would be that we've got a route map to getting to recurrent balance. Now that's a different order of magnitude to the ones that we've done before. And that will bring in a far wider set of questions, including collaboration with SCAS. We should name that. That is a route to solving some of those longer term problems, as well as looking again with our commissioners at what is an ambulance service to be commissioned for. Because I would draw attention again to the fact that we've got two very different models of service across CCAM and SCAS. So just to put my own personal imprimatur on that, I'm confident that we will get through this year. That is not the same as saying we yet have a plan that takes us to recurrent sustainability. And by December, I think if the planning, well, assuming that the planning guidance gets published on time, which it may or may not, that's when we will be having that conversation. So I just wanted to draw out the strategic element to your question too.
Thanks. Sorry, the last one, but I know you do justice. Did you with any of the indicators in the EJ's performance report when you looked at anything there that caused the committee concern? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and do a summary of the messages. Thank you, Chair. We met as People Committee on 25th of September, and as usual, we had a rich discussion and scrutiny of a wide range of topics. Howard mentioned in his Audit and Risk Committee report that there was slippage in the EDI discovery session, and that's mostly because we exercised a similarly forensic look as Liz and QPSC on the risk register and IQR. We did seek further clarity on themes behind the grievances and also turnover data, where we really wanted to see how it tranches across different parts of the organisation. The current aggregate view of the whole trust is not as useful as understanding trends specifically in EOC, and one where traditionally it's a higher percentage that we operate in versus corporate functions where it's lower. The average masks too much was the view of the committee. We sought further assurance on the actions that are being taken to improve sickness rates and appraisal compliance, which remains a challenge and will be a focus area for People Committee next month. We also had discussions around strategic workforce plan, which we'll continue to monitor given our own context of reorganisation, productivity, and the need to evolve to adapt to the strategy and models of care delivery. We saw good progress in the People Services Improvement Plan, particularly with our relationships with trade unions, and welcome the alignment of the People Services structure to the divisional structure. In terms of EDI priorities, it was good to see the plan that sits underneath those, and we'll be taking a good look at that at December's board in terms of progress against those. I think the one area where People Committee was not fully assured was around the NHSE education quality intervention. So colleagues may recall that by tomorrow there's a deadline to report evidence back on improvement across 6 areas. We wanted to use the September People Committee as a gateway ahead of that deadline. We got, I think I noted, majority assurance in terms of 5 out of 6 of those were reported as on track. But the deferral has been agreed at a positive meeting with NHSE for the 6th, which relates to employee relations and has been impacted by our own people services transformation, but right that we do it properly and sustainably rather than attempting to rush. But like I said, that was agreed with NHSE, and we will track that through People Committee. And that's probably all I'll flag, because the rest is in the report for noting. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. That's very clear and very concise, so thank you for that. Sarah, anything you'd like to respond to that, particularly around the one where the committee wasn't 100% assured?
Yeah,
oh,
thank
Jackie,
you.
sorry, I do apologise.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, just to for assurance around the people services restructure and the ability to sort of have the right capacity to deal with some of the challenges around grievances. So we have actually appointed 17 new posts over the summer. So it's a mix of external and internal people. So we're really pleased to report that we're nearly sort of 90% at capacity now after our phase 1. We have got a transition team now in place to support the new sort of model of service delivery to divisional structures, but particularly increasing our capacity to deal with and accelerate the resolution of sort of grievances and legacy issues. The point Max made around trade unions, so we have got a new role in place now, which is quite important, around trade union and partnership manager post, to continue to build the sort of stronger relationships with the unions and to build on our existing work around partnerships. I think in terms of culture improvement, we've done a significant piece of work around our core people policies. So what we're doing is accelerating that work around the disciplinary grievance and managing attendance policy, which should deliver different cultural improvements and allow local divisions to deal with issues more promptly, more quickly and more effectively. So I think that will be a key deliverable there. I'll let Jackie come in and just around the point around the education report. There were just two other points that I just wanted the board to note. So Mojan has already mentioned around Black History Month. So it starts with a series of podcasts with that our staff networks have developed. So I think that's really positive to the theme of standing firm in power and pride. And then I just wanted to alert the board to our first leadership conference on the 30th of October, where we've secured Professor Michael West, who will talk about the importance of compassionate leadership and really bring 200 of our leaders together, which is really exciting, to allow them time and space to reflect and engage on what's the journey ahead in terms of delivering a different culture at CCAM, which improves everybody's working lives. That's right, yeah. We've actually got 3 of our NEDs who are delivering insights into their journey around leadership. So I think it's really positive, and I think it should be a really exciting event.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start by saying, so the deadline for submitting evidence was tomorrow. We've completed our evidence submission today, so that's in train now to be considered by NHSE. We had a very, very positive meeting reviewing the work that we've done to date back in July, and it was clear to us as part of that meeting that there was a shared understanding that we've really turned a corner in the work that we're doing here in relation to education. We set ourselves some fairly kind of ambitious timescales to get some of the work done, and the work, particularly from an ER perspective, is much more around us getting kind of different policies and procedures in place, and we weren't able to collectively between kind of ourselves match the intense pace that we'd hoped for. We have had one single case that's relevant to this to this kind of work in the meantime. What we have done as a mitigation is just worked differently with the universities, with NHSE internally in terms of how communicative and joined up we've been in managing those things. So actually, in terms of the case that we've had, I think we've managed it quite effectively. The position that NHSE quality team colleagues have taken is they want us to do it properly. They're very pleased with the plans that we put in place and the intention that we have around those changes. So their focus is that we do the actions that we committed to undertake, rather than so they're sort of relatively relaxed about kind of the deadline of October. There are some elements that we know that they will want us to submit in the future, some additional evidence. Most of that is mainly related to issues like students not being on placement with us over the summer. So there are some additional bits of evidence that we need to generate, but we can only do that when we've actually got students on placement with us.
Thank you very much. That's good. Simon.
I want to pick up on 2 points, if I may. The first is your point, Max. I think we're now at a stage as an organisation where we need to move away from a top-down corporate view of the world in terms of where there is good performance and where there is challenged performance, and get much more into a localised conversation. I know that you at People Committee have already had one look at the triangulation work, and I would encourage that to continue. I'm certainly bringing it back to my executive management group. And I would link this to the points that were made around non-execs aligning to the divisional structures, because I think we have to move away from the committee being the sole place at which assurance is gained. It's really, and it will be continue to be important, and have much more of a context-specific discussion. There are different challenges in the organisation. There are different things to celebrate, not all of which get highlighted because of the breadth of time and the breadth of the subjects we have to cover and the paucity of time. So I would just really want to emphasise and encourage that conversation to continue around individuation and getting much more nuanced about what we pick up on. The other thing I wanted to highlight is Sarah's point, and I would really encourage board members, if they can, to attend the leadership conference. and it links to actually a piece of feedback that the Shadow Board gave, which was, is this education strategy for non-clinicians as well as for clinicians? One of the biggest critiques I get of our education programme is we're really fantastic at clinical education, but we're not great at leadership education. And so we have deliberately invited frontline leaders who are in the first role of their careers as leaders to try and expose them to kind of one of the top ranked thinkers in the country on leadership. So I'd really encourage you to come along to that if you can make it. And it will be a chance from you really to hear from those leaders about what they think and feel about those jobs. Because going back to the point that Sarah made about policies, getting new policies in place is of course great and it will be really helpful. But it's the confidence of those leaders to use those policies and to change the experience of frontline staff when they are necessary that will make them succeed or not. And so for me, that's a really important link to the policies. To what extent do our OTLs, our OMs feel confident that they can actually resolve issues locally rather than escalate them? Thank you.
Thanks. I'd certainly endorse, I think we all would, the importance of leadership and, you know, as a real skill and quality that we want to see widespread within the organisation. But can I open it to any questions of Max or Sarah or Jackie from anybody? No, it's been a long meeting. All right. Thank you both for the work you're doing, and thank you, Max, for the chairing of the People Committee. I think we have come to the end of the meeting. It's mid-year. This is a board in public, and I genuinely hope that members of the public or CCAM people would recognise the seriousness with which the board takes its responsibilities. I'd also say that what I've heard today is a considerable achievement, and I reflect back on the trust values, our trust values of courage. But I think some of the work that's been done with the new models of clinical care show real courage, thinking over and above what we normally do. I think what we're trying to do in digital, lots and lots of elements of courage in all that we do. Kindness goes without saying. You know, I am really struck by our clinicians and the kindness of approach, and hopefully we're also seeing greater kindness within the organisation to ourselves and to our fellow workers. And then the final thing about integrity, I had heard nothing, you know, and I'm an auditor by background. I've spent all my life in the public sector commenting on governance and poor performance and things that go wrong. But what I've sensed today is real high standards of integrity. So, you know, we should never be complacent. You know, there will always be new challenges that we face and continue to face. But I think genuinely, particularly the executives supported by the NEDs, can take pride in the work that you're doing in the interests of the communities that we serve. So, you know, tremendous thanks for that. I think at times like this we should stop and reflect in a very positive way. Anyway, that's the little homily from me. Forgive me for that. I think we now have lunch, unless there's anything else I need to do. Or we haven't got lunch because we're true public servants. We bring our own lunch, so if anybody's watching. But we are meeting again, I think, at 2 o'clock for our private board session. But thank you all very much for your contributions this morning. And I bring the meeting to a close, rather.